Chapter 2:11. Cursed City Lord was also shocked by this attack. He then looked at the crimson fire in Holt's hand with great envy. This is a top-notch level 29 superior divine weapon. It's amazing, really amazing. With this long sword and that move which accumulates power, Holt is undoubtedly the best amongst everyone else in terms of destructive prowess. Most of the knights in the arena who had also seen this attack moved over 50 meters away from the steel pillar as they could not withstand the high temperature. Rhoda let out a deep breath. So powerful, really too powerful. The prowess of this attack has probably surpassed the limits of a first transition knight. This is not an attack that can be performed by someone at the knight level. Hamel also exclaimed, "Seems like Holt will be in first place in the first stage. As expected of a third-generation disciple of a divine-level expert. This is what great power is." Anderson's face turned grim, as if he had not expected Holt to be able to perform such a powerful attack. The speed and style of this attack was not very fast or exquisite, and it required one to accumulate power before it could be activated. It was a move that pursued destructive prowess. However, its destructive prowess was so great that it left people speechless. The other students went up one by one, including Rhoda, Hamel, Manny, and the others. However, there was no one else who could reach Holt's and Anderson's level. Next, it was David's turn. He wore a pair of golden gloves, and when he clenched his fists tightly, bolts of lightning started to surround his fists. Governor Devitt's brows twitched slightly. Thunder God gloves? This glove was clearly quite famous. It was the heirloom of Mongol City's city lord. To think that he had given it to David to participate in the regional selection. This glove was a level 25 superior divine weapon, and there were layers of lightning surrounding the fists. Not only could it paralyze the enemy, but it could also release high temperatures to burn the enemy. The high temperature it released in an instant could even exceed 10,000 degrees. It was a pity that it could not last for long. Although the temperature was high in an instant, the total amount of heat was not high, and its destructive prowess was far from that of the Crimson Fire longsword. Many of the spectators in the arena had clearly recognized this weapon as well, and they started whispering amongst themselves. David broke into a proud smile and got into a stance, about to perform one-man army. By controlling the air pressure and working together with the Thunder God gloves, he would create extremely high-temperature lightning strikes to melt the steel pillar. But just as he was about to throw a punch, there was a sudden noise coming from the stage. "Why isn't he wearing underwear?" Ferdinand shouted. "Isn't it yellow today?" Bursts of laughter instantly came from the stage. David's heart tightened and his left hand couldn't help but touch the belt of his trousers. His other fist, however, lost its aim. In an instant, the power of the lightning strike was greatly reduced, and it only made a 5-inch dent on the surface of the steel pillar. Devitt shook his head. "You're too impatient." 11 points. The other examiners were also disappointed by David's performance and gave him 5 points. They were testing to become conferred knights, and all aspects of their qualities had to be top-notch. It was the same for their tolerance toward the outside world. For a person who could even cause others to laugh at him to cause him to make mistakes, it would not be possible for the examiners to stop the audience from laughing. It would only make the examiners feel that the person who had been affected by the laughter had a poor mental quality and was useless. One had to know that in a battle between experts, every minute and second was incomparably crucial. Just how complicated would the various thoughts that would be during a battle be? A person who could not even focus. Devitt was too disappointed in David. Hearing that, David lowered his head, blushing. However, his hatred for Fang Xinjian and Ferdinand grew, and he kept on swearing in his heart that he would kill them. He glared at Ferdinand fiercely, but Ferdinand just rolled his eyes at him. Finally, when it was time for the last person, Fang Xinjian appeared. As he had been late, he was added as the last candidate for the regional selection this time around, and was placed last. However, although he had entered the arena, no one felt that Fang Xinjian would be able to cause greater damage than what Holt had done earlier. Countless people in the stands were still enthusiastically discussing Holt's fire dragon slash earlier. He's here. It's Fang Xinjian, a rare first transition job, and he even has heaven's perception. That's useless. Be it the windstorm sword hero or heaven's perception, they are both not good at attacking. His destructive prowess can't possibly surpass Anderson's and Holt's. Regardless of whether it was the aristocrats in the spectator stands or the other participants in the training grounds, they were all people who knew the rope. They had all understood the characteristics of the windstorm sword hero and heaven's perception beforehand, and they did not think highly of Fang Xinjian's score. Moreover, Wei Ling had already gone up previously, and although he had the same heaven's perception, he had only scored 12 points. How much more could Fang Xinjian possibly score? However, Fang Xinjian was not affected by all these. He would definitely pass the regional selection this time around, and he would also pass the second transition to become a conferred knight. By then, he would be able to rise up to the middle and upper echelons of the empire. At that stage, no one would be able to harm him as they pleased, and they would definitely try to rope him in. There were only 5,000 conferred knights in the entire empire, and only over 200 conferred knights in the entire Great Western region. There were about 2,000 conferred knights in all 8 regions, and the remaining 3,000 conferred knights were all the upper echelons of the imperial capital. What kind of concept was this? It could be said that the entire empire was ruled by these 5,000 or so people. They would either rule over a city like Cursed City Lord or Mongol City Lord, manage a prefectural academy like Headmaster Jackson, or lead an army. Even if they did not rule over an area, they would usually be political centers like the Great Western City or the imperial capital, and they would be top-notch characters in various key departments. Therefore, right now, Fang Xinjian did not have too many reservations. What he wanted to do was to showcase his talent as much as possible, so that he would receive more attention, more resources, and more people to rope in so that he could cultivate even faster. Therefore, he did not plan on holding back too much of his abilities. He opened up his palm, and the effulgence weapon had already taken form. The high-frequency effulgence weapon, Silver Fox, which was like a nebula fog, appeared in his hand. Next, the level 20 superior divine weapon, Styx, which hung at his waist, was also drawn out. The Silver Fox was slowly placed on top of the Styx, and the effulgence weapon and divine weapon gradually merged into one. It looked as if the Styx was covered in a layer of faint glow and fog, and it was trembling continuously at a rate of 1,500 times per second. Holding the Styx in one hand, Fang Xinjian's other hand touched the metal pillar before him. The metal pillar had already returned to its original state, and Fang Xinjian's palm pressed against the cold metal pillar. He activated his heaven's perception at full power, gathering every bit of information about the metal pillar. Color, shape, weight, temperature, density. A complete model of the metal pillar was formed in Fang Xinjian's mind. All sorts of information, be it internal or external, was gradually exposed before Fang Xinjian. Simultaneously, he activated his unparalleled sword intent, crazily searching for the metal pillar's weaknesses. Many light spots appeared in the model that Fang Xinjian had constructed in his mind. However, the toughness of the metal pillar's material was too high, and Fang Xinjian's sword arts cultivation was still insufficient for him to slash through it easily. Therefore, he could only vaguely sense some possible weaknesses. There was a total of 188 of them. In this stage, slashing the heavenly pillar could only be performed once. This meant that he needed to slash out 188 times in one move. Chapter 2:12. Therefore, in the next moment, within 10 meters from Fang Xinjian, the invisible sharp aura grew increasingly stronger. Streams of ether sword ripples appeared behind him, circling around his back like the thousand-armed guanine or a peacock spreading its tail. It was something that ordinary people would not be able to see. Only Feng Shijian himself or conferred knights who possessed heaven's perception would be able to sense it. The 4 examiners in the surroundings had clearly sensed the existence of the ether sword ripples, and their eyes were filled with astonishment. In the next moment, the ether sword ripples on Feng Shijian's left and back all became scorching hot, while the ether sword ripples on his right and back all became cold. This was the new special effect he had gained after synthesizing his skills. It allowed the ether sword ripples to change their frequency, allowing them to heat up and cool down. Streams, streams, streams. A total of 400 streams of ether sword ripples appeared on Feng Shijian's back like many invisible sharp swords. 200 of them were heated up to over 500 degrees Celsius, while the other 2 were cooled down to -30 degrees Celsius. With Feng Shijian's current physical strength, he could only unleash 550 streams of ether sword ripples. This meant that he had unleashed over 80% of his powers in an instant. Governor Devitt's eyes were filled with astonishment. What kind of attack is this? Windstorm's sword hero has such a skill? This skill is too terrifying. It has far surpassed the abilities of a first transition expert. Holt relied on his divine weapon, but Feng Shijian relied on his own powers? Effulgence weapon, divine weapon, unparalleled sword intent apex, as well as releasing 400 streams of ether sword ripples, Feng Shijian flipped through the pages of his abilities, especially the ether sword ripples. Each of them had 5 times his strength and could slash out at 10 times the speed of sound. Almost at the same moment when Feng Shijian had done all these, Governor Devitt shook the air and shouted, "Everyone, be careful! Those below night level. No, those below conferred night level, retreat 100 meters away." Seeing that everyone was still in a daze, Devitt had no choice but to bellow again, "Quick!" The spectators in the front row started to retreat. Although the students who were closer could not sense the ether sword ripples and did not understand them, they also continued to retreat. However, just as they were halfway back, Feng Shijian moved abruptly. Boundaries negation activated. The silver fox sticks in his hand was like a bolt of lightning that cut through the sky. Its speed was extremely fast. In the liquid-like air, Feng Shijian's clothes trembled crazily, and his entire body seemed to be stretched. After seeing the sparks created by the intense friction with the air, the longsword in Feng Shijian's hand instantly displayed 188 sword shadows. With a low hiss, it was as if a scorching hot metal rod had been pierced into a human body. The silver fox sticks in Feng Shijian's hand brought along layers of misty luster as it pierced a distance of half a meter into the metal pillar. No one was able to see the process of Feng Shijian's sword attack. They could only see the final result. When they saw that the long sword had sunk half a meter into the ground, they were all astonished. This result was the best after Holt's and Anderson's. But it seemed to be nothing more than this. Everyone felt that although this destructive prowess was not bad, it did not seem like there was a need for a warning like what the governor had done earlier, right? Humans' thoughts moved very quickly. Just as this thought appeared in everyone's mind, in less than 1,000th of a second, Feng Shijian's 188 sword strikes had already landed on the steel pillar. It was only then that the 400 streams of ether sword ripples truly displayed their prowess. 188 swords pierced into the weak point of the steel pillar, and then the last sword strike caused the internal parts to explode, creating resonance. With the reinforcement from his level 5 mental cultivation method, each of the 400 ether sword ripples had 5 times the strength. In that instant, it was as if Feng Shijian had unleashed a killing prowess that was 1,000 times his own. How terrifying was that? How horrifying was that? It was as if Feng Shijian had first weakened the steel pillar with 188 swords, then caused the internal parts to resonate, and then slashed out 1,000 swords onto the steel pillar. There were also cold and hot attributes, causing it to expand when it was heated and contract when it was cold. How terrifying was the compression of power! How terrifying was the impact of the energy! It was as if it had slashed through the atmosphere and split open the earth. Therefore, at the same moment when Fang Xinjian's longsword pierced into the steel pillar, he immediately pulled out his sword and retreated crazily. Even he himself did not dare to face this explosive power. In the next moment, amidst a deafening sound, under the compression of the extremely ferocious power, it was as if several hundred bombs had exploded at the same time. Over 10 tall buildings collapsed at the same time, and violent smoke and dust soared into the sky. Air currents that could be seen by the naked eye spread out in all directions. All the knights had no choice but to release their reduced force fields to fend off the repercussions of the explosion. They then looked at the scene before them with their eyes and mouths agape. It was only when the smoke dissipated and the dust was slowly blown away by the strong gales that the position of the steel pillar was revealed. There was no longer any steel pillar. Other than a crater that looked like a meteorite, there was nothing else there. No, it should be said that there were only fragments on the ground. Looking at this scene, Anderson's mouth was agape. He felt that there was only one word that could describe his current feelings. F***ck. Anderson was not the only one who was stunned by Fang Xinjian's attack. It should be said that everyone present was stunned by Fang Xinjian's attack. This was also the first time Fang Xinjian had truly displayed the great power of Ether Sword Ripples in front of everyone ever since he had picked up the Ether Sword Ripples. And this power was a little too strong compared to a first transition expert. Cursed City Lord blinked, looked at the ground which was filled with fragments, and let out a long breath. What he was thinking was, if he were to take this attack head-on, how many injuries would he suffer? Governor Devitt's eyes were wide open as well, a little astonished by Fang Xinjian's performance. If he were to take that attack head-on, of course he would be able to fend it off. However, if he were to be ambushed like this, even he would suffer internal injuries. He was a second transition level 29 expert at the pinnacle. Of course, conferred knights had all attained heaven's perception and could see everything within a 10-meter radius. It was unlikely that they would be ambushed. He smiled and shook his head. This Fang Xinjian had given him too many surprises, and he could not help but smile. Looking at Fang Xinjian, who had retreated into the distance, he felt that the more he looked at him, the more he liked him. If this Fang Xinjian is nurtured well, he'll have a high chance to participate in the national selection and bring back the national champion. By then, he'll be a Triple Crown winner. Haha, there's only been one Triple Crown winner since the founding of the country. There's also Anderson, Holt, and Wei Lung. There's really a lot of geniuses this year. Thinking of this, Governor Devitt's expression became even more benevolent. He looked at Fang Xinjian as if he was looking at a treasure. He said calmly, "To be honest, Fang Xinjian, you've surprised me again. Haha, you're always able to surprise me every time we meet. But this time, you're the most amazing. Regarding your earlier attack, I can only say one word: perfect. If I were to give a score, I can only give you 100 points. The other 3 examiners reacted as well, throwing a surprised glance at Devitt. However, after giving it some thought, they threw a glance at the steel pillar which was slowly regenerating like a pile of mud, and immediately felt that this score was well deserved. The aged commissioner of education said, "Fang Xinjian, your talent is unrivaled, and you've already achieved so much at such a young age. In a few years' time, the Empire's top 10 divine-level experts will probably become the top 11. However, that attack earlier hurt both you and yourself, and there are still flaws. I'll give you 95 points. Yari smiled, looked at Fang Xinjian, and said, "In the future, you'll definitely become a great sword grandmaster. I think very highly of you, so I'll give you 100 points as well." He then joked, "In the future, I'll let my son acknowledge you as his teacher." Armstrong fell silent for a moment before saying coldly, In terms of destructive prowess, amongst these 512 people, there's no doubt that you're number one. It doesn't matter how many points I give you. I'll give you 100 points. Your stage should be at the national selection. I look forward to your performance in the future. Therefore, Fang Xinjian got 98. 75 points, fully deserving of being number one. Chapter 213. Both in and out of the arena, everyone was first astonished by the stunning effect of Fang Xinjian's earlier attack. It was an earth-shattering attack, and everyone was thinking that if that attack had been directed at them, they would probably have been killed immediately. Then, they heard the examiner's evaluations of Fang Xinjian. It was as if waves of bombs had exploded in their heads, continuously shaking them. Perfect. Definitely reaching the divine level. Future Sword Grandmaster. Looking forward to his performance in the national selection. It sounded like an exaggeration, but only a compliment like this could compare to Fang Xinjian's earlier attack. It was because that was the destructive prowess of over 1,000 sword attacks from Fang Xinjian. Lilia waved her fist excitedly and said, "Teacher is really cool." Cursed City Lord sighed, looked at the aristocratic ladies around him, whose eyes were glowing with greed, and thought, "Lily, with this, you'll have even more competitors." However, the way he looked at Fang Xinjian was increasingly like a mother-in-law looking at her son-in-law. He felt that Fang Xinjian seemed to be getting better and better. Ferdinand let out a breath and said, "This is really satisfying. To think that Xinjian still has such a trick up his sleeves. City Lord, if you were the one to receive it, would you be able to withstand this attack?" Cursed City Lord let out a disdainful snort and said, "Of course I would be able to withstand it. But against some conferred knights who have just completed the second transition, the prowess of this attack is sufficient." On the other side, Anderson, who was screaming crazily in his heart, looked at Fang Xinjian in disbelief. Holt had surpassed him because he had a divine level legacy and a level 29 superior divine weapon. This was something he could accept. However, to think that Fang Xinjian had suddenly appeared and surpassed him by a huge margin. This caused Anderson, who had been used to being number one since young, to feel a little unbalanced. Ever since he could remember, he had never lost to anyone of the same age. Ever since he transitioned into the Shadow Death God, he had never lost to a knight. In the past year, he had only used one move to deal with any first transition opponent. This represented his pride. It was because he felt that no knight would be able to withstand even a single move from him. Those who were able to do so would be considered qualified to live. But now, Fang Xinjian had actually crushed him in terms of destructive power and explosive power, which he was most proud of. For Anderson, who had always been the one to crush others, this was simply too infuriating. He felt that everyone's praise for Fang Xinjian was a mockery of him, and the praises from the 4 examiners made him feel even worse. "Humph, just you wait. It's not like I'm powerful just because I have a powerful move." Anderson snorted coldly in his heart. "Wait until the arena battles. See how I deal with you. My Shadow Reaper is best at one-on-one combat." On the other side, Holt broke into an unfathomable smile. He looked at Fang Xinjian and thought to himself, "To think that I would be able to meet such an interesting character on this trip. It's a pity that he rejected the Holy Orison's invitation. Otherwise, he would have had the chance to enter our world." Even Wei Lung, who had nothing else on his mind, raised his head and looked at this scene in astonishment. Let alone Rhoda, Hamel, Ralph, Manny, and the others. David clenched his fists tightly. Every single evaluation from the examiners made him feel extremely terrible. Looking at the 2 knights behind him, who had different expressions on their faces and seemed to have the intention to retreat, he said coldly, "I'll add another 1,000 gold to each of you and guarantee that I'll send all of you safely to the Sand Country in the west. Moreover, I'm not asking you to break the rules or kill anyone. What are you afraid of? And don't forget, your families are all in our hands." Hearing his words, the two knights exchanged a glance and then nodded helplessly. David looked coldly at Feng Xinjian, thinking viciously, "You can continue to be arrogant now. It won't be long, it won't be long. Tomorrow I'll eliminate you completely." He then turned to look at Cursed City Lord and Lilia, and the hatred in his heart grew even stronger. "Just you wait. You'll regret this. All of you will regret this. No one can come out unscathed after offending me." Just like that, the first stage ended with Feng Xinjian taking first place. In second place was Holt, and in third place was Anderson. Only the 100 people with the highest scores remained. They would stay in the regional academy for a day and continue with the second stage the next day. The remaining 400 people were naturally eliminated. In an instant, endless sorrow shrouded these people. Some dropped to their knees and hammered the ground, while others wept bitterly and pleaded with the examiners. There were also people who laughed out loud, taking a pile of money and planning to have fun for the night. There were also people who silently disappeared into the crowd. Examinee number 1 walked up to his children with a face full of disappointment. He patted their heads and said, "I'm sorry. To think that Daddy would be eliminated before even passing the first stage. The older I get, the more useless I get." "It's not like that, Daddy." The young lady cried and hugged the middle-aged man, saying, "In our eyes, you're the strongest." The young man said, "Daddy, don't worry. The next time I participate, I'll definitely pass the regional selection." The middle-aged man smiled. All right. Let's go back to the hotel. Your mother must be waiting anxiously." The 400 people left dejectedly, while the remaining 100 people excitedly went to a building that had been prepared for them in the academy. The building had a total of 3 floors. The second and third floors were the dormitories. There were a total of 50 rooms, with 2 people to a room. The first floor was the bathhouse and canteen, which would provide 3 meals a day. Manny, Rhoda, and the others all followed behind Feng Xinjian. Manny smiled and poked Feng Xinjian's chest, saying, "You rascal, how on earth did you do that earlier move? You couldn't have started synthesizing skills when your heaven's perception was only at 10% synchronization rate, right?" For something like this, Feng Xinjian naturally had a plan in mind. He said, "I did some synthesizing. My luck wasn't bad, and I succeeded in a few." Hearing Feng Xinjian's words, Manny and the others were all astonished. If it were them, they would definitely not dare to synthesize the skills that they had cultivated for so many years when faced with a success rate of only 10%. Manny gave Feng Xinjian a thumbs up and said, "You're amazing." Walking to the entrance of the dormitory, Manny said, "Let's go and get something to eat. This is the Regional Academy's canteen, and all of their dishes are made from ferocious beasts." Hearing about food, Feng Xinjian's eyes lit up, and his interest was suddenly piqued. He nodded and said, "Then we'll have to give it a good try." Rhoda looked at Feng Xinjian with a strange expression. She felt that he did not seem like someone who liked good food. She had always felt that Feng Xinjian was a rock that only knew how to cultivate. Other than cultivating, he probably only knew how to kill people. Chapter 214. The canteen prepared for the knights participating in the regional selection was, of course, different from the canteen for ordinary university students. It was more like a restaurant, with tables for 4 people placed there. Once someone sat down, a maid would come over to take their orders. Manny took the menu and was about to order when Feng Xinjian said in a domineering manner, "Give me 2 servings of each dish." Sensing Manny's awkward gaze, Feng Xinjian said, "We're all knights. There's no need to stand on ceremony." That was right. Knights consumed a lot of energy to begin with, and the amount of food they required far surpassed that of ordinary people. For example, when Feng Xinjian was in Cursed Academy, he had ferocious beasts for his meals, and he had been able to eat 5 meals a day. However, speaking of the food in Miracle World, Feng Xinjian had always felt that there was something strange about it. Other than a portion of heavenly and earthly treasures and ferocious beasts, many of the animals and plants in this world were very similar to those on earth. For example, potatoes, vegetables, and even pineapples, black fungus, pigs, cows, sheep, and horses. These were almost the same as those on earth. Logically speaking, these should be two different worlds, and it should be impossible for them to be the same. This was something that Fang Xinjian had not been able to understand. However, this was not something that Fang Xinjian was concerned about. The evolution of living things was something that scientists had to study. His attention was soon attracted by the feast in the regional academy. He had performed 400 streams of ether sword ripples earlier, which had depleted a great deal of his physical strength. He had been hungry for a long time. The first dish was a grilled ferocious pheasant. The chicken meat was fresh and tender, and it almost melted in one's mouth. The crispy skin on the surface also contained the taste of various spices, as well as the fragrance of the grilled meat. Fang Xinjian finished it in a few mouthfuls, and Manny also snatched 2 chicken thighs without showing any signs of weakness. Moreover, it was not just delicious. As the ingredients came from the ferocious pheasant, it contained a powerful vital energy and blood. After a few mouthfuls, Fang Xinjian could feel waves of heat starting from his stomach and exploding toward his limbs. Then there was a vegetable dish called the pineapple salad. It was made from steamed and mashed potatoes, then a sauce made from a mixture of 12 herbs was poured over it. Finally, the mashed potatoes were shaped into the shape of a pineapple. Not only did it look good, it also tasted refreshing. The sauce and mashed potatoes gave off the feeling of a cream soup, fragrant and rich. The most nutritious dish was of course the soup made from the 12 herbs. Almost all of them were heavenly and earthly treasures that had various strengthening effects on the body. After eating, Fang Xinjian felt that his reaction, flexibility, and physical strength all had slight improvement. Of Xinjian attribute, Fang Xinjian bodies had an academy. Fang Academy in the academy in. One delicious dish after another was served, but they were all finished off by Fang Xinjian, Manny, and Rhoda at an even faster speed. They were all first transition level 19 knights, and no matter what dish was served, they would be able to swallow it in a few big mouthfuls. Then, with the agitation of their internal organs, most of the food would be digested. Their stomachs were like huge millstones, possessing a digestive ability that far surpassed that of ordinary people. Moreover, they had just depleted their energy today, and the dishes in the regional academy far surpassed what they had eaten in the past in terms of taste, nutrition, and even appearance. This greatly increased their appetite. But as she ate, Rhoda suddenly froze. She stopped and looked straight at Fang Xinjian. Seeing her like this, Manny also looked at Fang Xinjian. Fang Xinjian frowned and asked, "What's wrong?" Rhoda smirked and said, "It's nothing. It's just that after knowing you for so long, this is the first time I've seen you smile." Laugh? Fang Xinjian subconsciously touched the corner of his mouth. It turned out that when he was eating, he suddenly revealed a slight smile. Fang Xinjian ate a few more mouthfuls of food. Manny and Rhoda saw that he was suddenly in a daze and could not help but ask, "What's wrong?" "It's nothing." Fang Xinjian suddenly stood up and walked out of the cafeteria. "I'm done. You guys can continue." The two of them looked at Fang Xinjian strangely, not understanding what was wrong with him. However, Rhoda smiled and thought to herself, "This guy is quite adorable when he smiles. Why does he always look like a dead person?" Fang Xinjian was even more amazed by his own smile than the other two. It had been a long time since he had felt happy and blissful. Logically speaking, the purple flames had taken away his kinship, love, and friendship. He should not have any feelings for anyone, but humans have many emotions. Just like the 7 deadly sins: arrogance, jealousy, wrath, sloth, greed, gluttony, and lust. If my kinship, love, and friendship have all been taken away, then arrogance, jealousy, wrath, sloth, greed, gluttony, and lust are all still there, then does that mean that gluttony has been left behind for me? Fang Xinjian carefully recalled his behavior for the past 1.5 years. He increasingly felt that every time he ate something delicious, his mood would improve a little. It was true that he was paying more and more attention to what he ate. He had initially thought that this was just a habit left behind from eating sumptuous meals every day. However, now that he thought about it, he increasingly felt that there was more to it than that. I'm really starting to like delicacies more and more. Moreover, delicacies can make me feel a hint of happiness? Fang Xizhan then thought, if gluttony is possible, then what about lust? However, he had stayed in Miracle World for 1.5 years. During this 1.5 years, he had never once felt anything for that girl. No, I don't feel anything. I don't feel anything when it comes to love. If it's true carnal lust, pure carnal lust would naturally mean that there would be no feelings, and he would just do it directly. Lilia and Rhoda's silhouettes suddenly appeared in Fang Xinjian's mind. He then shook his head fiercely, dispelling the distracting thoughts in his mind. He returned to his room, sat cross-legged on his bed, and continued his self-cultivation. Cultivation had long since become a part of his life. A silver fog that exuded a faint white light was circling between Fang Xinjian's palms. Each time it trembled, it would continue to strengthen Fang Xinjian's ether divine art cultivation. Late at night, in another room, the shadow assassin Anderson pressed his hands against the ground. The entire ground, walls, and all the furniture were encompassed by black shadows. These shadows continued to jump about, as if they were breathing and had a heartbeat. Geniuses did not appear just because they talked about it. Ever since 3 years ago, Anderson had not slept at all. Cultivation had long since become second nature to him. In the corner of the room, a female knight looked at this terrifying scene with a long face. She wanted to cry out but did not dare to do so. She was Anderson's roommate. As if feeling that the female knight was troublesome, Anderson opened his eyes, glared at her, and said, "Go sleep in the corridor. Don't disturb me here." The female knight left as if she had just been pardoned. Late at night, in another room, Holt slowly got up from his bed. He casually pulled a white bedsheet and wrapped it around his naked body. Looking at the other 2 fair and tender bodies on the bed, he smiled and walked to the window-sill, lifting his head to look at the moon. "Tomorrow will be a sunny day, right?" The night passed by. Not many knights had truly fallen asleep. Most of them were either busy with their final cultivation, recuperating, or too excited and nervous. However, the night would eventually pass, and everyone would welcome the second stage of the regional selection, the fight for the top rankings. Chapter 2:15. The 100 examinees arrived before the huge maze. The entire maze was a massive object with a length and width of over 1 kilometer and a height of 3 meters. It made everyone who saw the maze for the first time feel as if they were looking at a miracle. This was clearly not something that could be achieved with the engineering skills of this era. It must have been done by a powerful character with his own powers. As expected, Governor Devitt said, "This maze is known as the Perplexed Palace. It was created by the Great Western Region Regional Academy's first headmaster, the divine-level expert, the melancholic monarch. It is a place of seclusion that he personally created. After 200 years, it has not been damaged at all. Right now, we've placed all sorts of powerful ferocious beasts in the maze, ranging from level 1 to level 21. Of course, there's only one level 21 ferocious beast, but you guys still have to be careful." Hearing the governor's words, everyone looked at the extremely huge maze and exclaimed at the power of a divine-level expert. How powerful had the melancholic monarch been back then? Then, under Governor Devitt's guidance, everyone looked toward a stone tablet in front of the maze's entrance. A map of the entire maze was engraved on it, and there were 100 red dots on it. Governor Devitt said, "There are a total of 100 gathering points. Each of you will be in one of them, and you are not allowed to be more than 10 meters away from the gathering point. After all of you arrive at the gathering points, beast-luring incense will be released from all the gathering points. The dormant ferocious beasts will gradually awaken and then start to attack you. The last 50 examinees will be qualified to enter the third stage. However, you can't be passive in the competition. Those who fail to kill a ferocious beast every 10 minutes will be eliminated directly. The examinees are not allowed to attack each other directly. Of course, if you have a way to create trouble for the other examinees and eliminate them as soon as possible, then please do your best. It's because, other than survival, this stage also depends on how you compete and fight against each other. Hearing about beast-luring incense, most of the knights present were perplexed. They had no idea what this thing was. Only those knights who had participated in hunts and hunted ferocious beasts together with ordinary soldiers in the mountains, plains, or forests would have heard of this beast-luring incense. This was something that came from the sand country. It was said that a single drop of beast-luring incense would be able to lure all the ferocious beasts within a range of 300 meters. It was something that the sand country had specially developed for the purpose of hunting due to their lack of natural resources. However, as the ingredients were too valuable and the quantity was too little, ordinary people did not know of its existence. Beast-luring incense was already very rare in the Empire, and the knights present were all geniuses. What were geniuses? They were people who could focus on their cultivation and not care about trivial matters. Their ferocious beasts had all been bought, so how could they possibly follow the soldiers and poor people to hunt for their own food? Needless to say, they didn't know about the sand country's beast-luring incense. Even if they were to undergo combat practice every year, they would only be dealing with bandits, ferocious beasts that wreaked havoc, or wars like Garcia's. It was unlikely that they would spend too much time on hunting. That was because the most important part of hunting wasn't fighting. What they spent the most time on was waiting. But David had a confident look on his face. He obviously knew what it was. On the other side, Governor Devitt continued, "Right now, each of you will have to be searched. You're forbidden from bringing in poison, beast-luring incense, fuel, kerosene." Governor Devitt listed out a series of names and finally said, "All of the above are forbidden. Although I said that you'll be looking for trouble and competing with each other, the use of these things has nothing to do with one's abilities or intelligence. It's purely based on external items. You'd better bring them out yourselves." Devitt pointed to an empty space and said, "This will save you the trouble of being disqualified if I find out about it later." Many of the people present immediately revealed disappointed expressions. It was true that many of them had brought kerosene, poison, and the like, hoping to use these to protect themselves or to fend off the monsters, luring the ferocious beasts to other places. After all, it was much faster and safer to set fires and release poison than to kill the beasts themselves. However, this was not done based on intelligence or their own abilities, but purely based on external items. Therefore, it was naturally forbidden by Governor Devitt. There were even some people who knew about the existence of beast-luring incense and wanted to bring it in to strengthen the strength of the monsters in other places, so as to reduce the pressure on themselves. However, all of them revealed disappointed expressions. Within a short 5 minutes, many people walked out, piling up the empty space. No one would try to be lucky before a conferred knight's heaven's perception. After the inspection was completed, Devitt pointed to the 100 red dots on the stone monument and said, "Based on your ranking in the first stage, slashing the heavenly pillar, you'll be able to choose your spots. Fang Xinjian, you're in first place. You can go first." Hearing that, Fang Xinjian walked up, thinking about his understanding of this stage. The main point of this stage was to see how long one could last, but at the same time, one could not be passive in the competition. It was because if one did not kill a ferocious beast after 10 minutes, one would be eliminated. However, one could not just go on a killing spree. It was because there were ferocious beasts that had reached level 21. Although they were not as strong as a real conferred knight, they still far surpassed the abilities of a first transition knight. Therefore, in this competition, one had to have strong battle prowess and be able to kill ferocious beasts. At the same time, one had to pay attention to the rhythm of the competition, not causing too much of a commotion and attracting level 20 or 21 ferocious beasts. Or, one had to have strong concealment or defensive abilities to be able to fend off level 20 or even level 21 ferocious beasts. At the same time, one had to guard against other people trying to trip them up, using special abilities or schemes to deal with them. In short, this was a three-tiered test of one's battle prowess, endurance, and intelligence. However, this was only for ordinary people. Fang Xinjian was naturally different from ordinary people. What he wanted to do in the regional selection was to crush everyone with absolute power and talent, naturally becoming the regional champion. Then, he would receive the regional academy's full support and become a second transition level 29 conferred knight within a year's time. Then, he would be able to participate in the national selection next year. Therefore, he did not choose the corners that were easy to defend against. Instead, he pointed to a red in the middle of the maze and said, "I'll take this place." Everyone revealed astonished gazes. Devitt smiled, nodded, and said, "Haha, I'm looking forward to your performance even more now." However, Anderson clicked his tongue and mumbled to himself, "He snatched the place I wanted to choose." He felt that Fang Xinjian had once again snatched his limelight. Next was Holt, who had chosen a corner according to the rules. Then it was Anderson's turn. He pointed to a spot around Fang Xinjian and said, "I'll take this place." After saying that, he wrinkled his delicate nose and threw a glance at Fang Xinjian. Wei Ling, who was at the back, also chose a corner. Just like that, everyone chose different bases one by one. Rhoda chose the northwest, while Manny chose the northeast. David was also in the northwest. Contrary to everyone's expectations, the two knights who had been following behind him chose the two spots next to Fang Xinjian. In the entire maze, the closer one was to the center, the easier it would be for them to be surrounded and attacked from all directions. Therefore, other than Fang Xinjian and Anderson, no one else chose the center spot. Most of the time, they would choose the spots in the periphery first. After the periphery had been chosen, they would then slowly choose the spots in the center. However, the two knights did not hesitate to choose the spots in the middle. David looked at Fang Xinjian and laughed coldly inwardly. "Fang Xinjian, just you wait. I'll give you a big surprise." After everyone had made their choices, Governor Devitt said calmly, "Then let's go." At the next moment, Governor Devitt clenched his fist, and a huge ice pillar rose up from under everyone's feet. The moisture in the air continued to freeze, turning into an ice dragon that cut across the sky, sending everyone up into the air above the maze. Chapter 216. The ice dragon flew across the sky, and some of the knights looked nervously at the huge maze under their feet. Governor Devitt's voice rang out, "Haha, don't be nervous. Don't move around recklessly. I'll send you all to your respective locations. Don't blame me if you fall to your death." In that instant, everyone stopped moving, as if they were really afraid that their reckless movements would cause the governor to make a mistake. The next moment, as Governor Devitt's fingers moved slightly, the ice dragon in the sky abruptly disintegrated. Each examinee's feet were supported by a piece of ice, and they were sent to 100 different locations in the maze. All the knights who saw this scene were once again astonished by the power of a conferred knight. Regardless of whether it was the ice dragon that flew across the sky or the technique of escorting 100 knights to 100 locations at once, they all displayed how terrifying Governor Devitt was. Fang Xinjian's body also landed in the middle of the maze along with the ice pieces. He landed lightly on the ground and discovered that with a small hole in the ground as the center, a blood-colored circle had been drawn 10 meters around it. For the rest of the competition, he would have to persevere in this circle until the end of the competition. At this moment there was another rumbling sound. In the east of the maze, a stone platform suddenly rose from the ground. Like an elevator, it rose to a height of more than 100 meters, becoming a high platform. It was done by Deputy Governor Armstrong. All the spectators were standing on the stone platform, looking at the competition with agitation and excitement. Cursed City Lord stood together with Lilia, Ferdinand, Anthony, and Robert. Cursed City Lord said, "This stage tests one's ability to fight head-on and one's survivability. The Windstorm Sword hero still has the upper hand." Lilia nodded, looking at the maze nervously like the others. She suddenly shouted, "Look, why is teacher in the middle of the maze?" Cursed City Lord frowned. Fang Xinjian came in first in the previous stage. Logically speaking, he should be the first to choose this position. Does that mean that he chose this position himself? At the same time, the audience on the platform also noticed that both Fang Xinjian and Anderson had actually chosen to enter the center of the maze. They all gasped in surprise. They never imagined that two people with such high rankings would actually take such a risk. After all, there were level 21 ferocious beasts inside the maze. In a corner of the grandstand, Treja clan Xiao Yi and Zhou Yong had arrived as well. Xiao Yi had once tried to use the Ring of Lightning to defeat Fang Xinjian, but had been defeated multiple times by him. In the end, he had even defeated the 8 knights in the Treja clan's residence and abducted Kaunitz. Kaunitz's whereabouts were still unknown, and the Treja clan had become a thing of the past. Their status in Cursed had plummeted. As for Zhou Yong, he was only here to spectate. Xiao Yi, on the other hand, had been eliminated in the previous round. Looking at Fang Xinjian in the middle of the maze, his expression was filled with hatred. The Treja clan's declining status had affected him as well. Many of his clan's businesses had been suppressed, and their income had plummeted. Their cultivation resources had also been reduced. How could he not hate Fang Xinjian? Zhou Yong asked, "Martial brother Xiao Yi, what plans does the clan head have? Will he come?" Xiao Yi replied coldly, "It's useless even if the clan head comes. However, he has already contacted Lord Adri, the Forbidden Army's deputy commander, a level 25 conferred knight, and the younger brother of the Treja clan's clan head. Lord Adri will probably arrive very soon." "Will Lord Adri come personally?" Xiao Yi nodded and said, "How can he not come when he has the hatred of having his bloodline cut off?" Previously, the Lord had sent people to search for Fang Xinjian's traces, but they had not been able to find him. But to think that he would dare to appear in the great western city to participate in the regional selection? When Lord Adri arrives, he'll teach him a good lesson. Suddenly, Zhou Yong's gaze flashed and he said, "Look, Fang Xinjian has chosen the middle position." Xiao Yi said, "Humph, what an arrogant fellow. This Fang Xinjian is getting more and more arrogant as he gets stronger. But this is good as well. In order to make someone fail, one must first make him crazy. The more arrogant and savage he is, the closer he will be to failure." Regardless of what the people on the platform were saying, as the 100 examinees and spectators got into position, the 4 examiners, with Governor Devitt in the lead, landed in the air above the maze. Governor Devitt said in a loud voice, "Then I announce that the competition shall begin." In the next moment, a large amount of beast-luring incense was released from the small holes in the center of each of the spots. These beast-luring incense were colorless, odorless, and useless to humans. However, to ferocious beasts, they were the most blatant temptation and stimulant. Amidst the nervous and agitated knights, 1 minute later, the first beast's roar rang out. The terrifying roar was like a combination of a lion and a tiger, filled with endless brutality and coldness. As this roar rang out, many other beasts' roars rang out, encompassing the entire maze in an instant. It was as if they had arrived in a primitive forest filled with all sorts of wild beasts. In the sky, Governor Devitt also snapped his fingers, activating his killing technique, 100 Dragons Ice Curse. A total of 100 ice dragons, formed from water vapor, appeared in the air above the maze. They were like real huge dragons, roaming about, ready to save the examinees who had given up or had lost their ability to battle at any time. However, at the start of the competition, the two knights who had been with David earlier but had now chosen to take the spots around Fang Xinjian move. They did the same action almost at the same time, each taking out a dagger and slashing their wrists. Fresh blood spurted out from their wounds, and all of the blood was collected into the small bottles they had prepared beforehand. Then, they attached the small bottles to their arrows, drew their bows, and nocked the arrows. Accompanied by two sharp whistling sounds, the arrows soared up into the air, making a small arc as they headed toward Fang Xinjian's position. Fang Xinjian frowned, not understanding what the two of them were trying to do. In this stage, they were not allowed to attack each other. Although he could only sense through the wind, he could sense that the two arrows were shooting out from the maze in a parabolic trajectory. Their speed was slow, and their direction was not accurate either. They would not be able to hit Fang Xinjian, and could only hit the outskirts of the stronghold. However, although these two arrows did not pose much of a threat to him, for safety's sake, he still activated the luminous heaven-soaring slash with a wave of his finger. Two streams of sword cheese shot out, knocking down the two arrows in the air. However, when this attack landed, the sword cheese swept across the air, shattering the glass bottle. Fresh blood splattered out instantly, landing next to Fang Xinjian's stronghold. Fang Xinjian frowned. He had sensed the arrows through the wind and sound, and had not sensed that there was a glass bottle on top of them. This was the flaw of being blind. The blood was even stranger. The moment it splattered onto the ground, it instantly dried up and turned pitch black, as if the essence within had dissipated. Simultaneously, the two knights who had shot the arrows raised their palms and shouted, "I give up! I give up!" Chapter 217. Just as the two of them called out to give up, two ice dragons descended from the sky, sending them out. David broke out in laughter. It was because from this moment onwards, his plan had succeeded. The first and third stages of the regional selection were very individual tests, and it was almost impossible to interfere with each other. The fourth stage, on the other hand, depended on one's abilities. Unless he found a chance to poison the opponents, it would be too difficult to do so in the regional academy. Therefore, his last hope lay in the second stage, striving for the best. This was the only stage in which he could borrow strength from the ferocious beasts. He asked around for many methods, but in the end, he still set his sights on the beast-luring incense. However, if he were to bring it in directly, it would probably be prohibited. It was because if he were to use it directly, it would mean that all sorts of strong acids, poisons, kerosene, and the like could be used. The entire examination would lose its meaning, and this was something the examiners would definitely not allow. Therefore, he gave up on the beast-luring incense and thought of something else. Other than growing and leveling up naturally, the other way for ferocious beasts to level up was to engulf all sorts of heavenly and earthly treasures. Many ferocious beasts had accidentally engulfed a large amount of heavenly and earthly treasures and turned violent. Also, many ferocious beasts had unlocked greater potential after engulfing heavenly and earthly treasures, even evolving into a different type of ferocious beast. Therefore, the method David had chosen was to bring heavenly and earthly treasures into the human body. He spent 7 days, spending over 10,000 gold, to feed these two knights. At the same time, he forbade them from doing any exercise or cultivating, to prevent them from digesting the medicinal prowess. With this, their blood finally contained a large amount of medicinal prowess from heavenly and earthly treasures, as well as countless essences that could attract ferocious beasts. When these herbal essences were mixed together with the beast-luring incense, they had a fatal attraction to all ferocious beasts. Blind, you're blind. David thought coldly. No matter how sharp your hearing is, no matter if you've attained heaven's perception or not. No matter how you try to hide it, you won't be able to hide the fact that you're blind. You can't see beyond 10 meters, so you won't be able to detect the blood potion on the arrow. Blindness is your major flaw. No matter how you try to hide it, it's useless. In that instant, more and more ferocious beasts went berserk. Their eyes were bloodshot and blank as they looked in the direction where Fang Xinjian was. At the next moment, they surged toward Fang Xinjian like a tidal wave. Governor Devitt's brows twitched, but at the next moment, he smiled. In the distance, Yaris shook the air and transmitted his voice over. He asked, "Let them go?" Devitt said, "This can't be considered cheating. It can be considered an intelligent scheme." Armstrong, whose face was filled with scars, also said, "Battles require one to use their brains. There are enough people who only know how to use brute force. There can't be all conferred knights who only know how to use brute force, right?" Devitt nodded and said, "If he's using beast-luring incense, then he's just relying on external objects. However, doing so can be considered a strategy. You guys have to be very clear about this." Furthermore, after saying that, Devitt smiled. "Do you think that the competition is over just like that? There were 100 knights here. How many of them were fools? 100 people's thoughts, 100 people's actions. With their cultivation, how could they be able to calculate clearly? In the end, strategies are just supplementary. In the end, what is relied on is still one's own abilities." Just as they were speaking, the ferocious beasts were already surging toward Fang Xinjian. Many of the knights, who had been prepared to fight, were surprised to discover that the wild beasts did not choose to fight with them. Instead, they headed straight for the center of the maze. Hamel wielded a silver greatsword, sending a level 12 giant wolf flying with a single slash. Just as he was about to give chase once again, he realized that the giant wolf had only rolled over, wanting to charge past him from the side. Hamel's gaze flickered, and he immediately dodged the huge wolf. Then he realized that most of the ferocious beasts that were charging toward him had gone around him. At the start, he had taken the opportunity to kill a few of them. However, he soon reacted and stopped. Has something happened? But since I can save energy, there's no need for me to do anything. I'll wait and see if there are any changes. On the other side, the effulgence weapon in Rhoda's hands was activated. Together with the small silver spear, she pierced through spatial gaps and pierced through the head of a ferocious wild boar from a distance of over 100 meters. She then followed up with a flick of her spear, sending a ferocious tiger flying into the air. Looking at the ferocious beasts that were trying to go around her, unwilling to fight her head-on, she showed no signs of letting them off. It's obvious that there's something wrong with the ferocious beasts. They rarely take the initiative to attack me. But at this moment I should take the opportunity to kill them. Rhoda's thoughts kept on flashing past her mind, as well as her understanding of Governor Devitt. When ordinary people participate in the regional selection, they only know how to increase their abilities and how to clear the stages. But I know that the most important part of the regional selection is the examiner, the governor. There were a total of 8 governors in the Empire's 8 regions, each presiding over the regional selection for each region. Other than the Pantheon Monument observation and the arena battles, the first 2 stages were all set by each governor. The questions and the criteria for passing the questions represented the governor's preferences. The governor is also a human, so he'll naturally have his preferences. Some like to fight head-on, some like to scheme and scheme, some like to hide and deal a killing blow, some like to fight head-on, and some like to be sneaky. Every governor's preferences are different, so their evaluations of the examinees in the first 2 stages would naturally be different as well. Rhoda understood very well that if she wanted to gain an advantage in the first 2 stages, she would have to understand Governor Devitt's character and preferences. This was to try to figure out the examiner's intentions. Rhoda had naturally tried to figure out Devitt's intentions. She knew that he hated those who did not put in much effort in battles, and that he liked knights who dared to fight valiantly and led the way. This was called trying to figure out the higher-ups' intentions. On the other side, Manny displayed his true prowess for the first time in front of everyone. He did not use any weapons or defensive equipment, only striking out with his pair of claws. Each time he struck out, his palms would bring up hints of gravitational waves, and every ferocious beast that he had targeted would fall to the ground, either with their internal organs damaged or their bones shattered. In any case, he had crippled a large number of ferocious beasts and kept them by his side. Manny thought to himself, I wonder how many people have realized that there's a limit to the number of ferocious beasts. As the number of ferocious beasts we kill continues to increase, and as the smell of the beast-luring incense gets weaker, the ferocious beasts around us will also get lesser and lesser. By then, the person who can maintain the rhythm of killing one ferocious beast every 10 minutes will be able to last till the end. Chapter 218. On Holt's side, as the astral ancestor's grand disciple, he appeared to be more relaxed. It was because he had the top-notch abilities amongst the 100 knights. Therefore, he had the most choices. The level 29 superior divine weapon Crimson Fire, in his hand, had already turned into a huge dragon formed from high-temperature flames that was several hundred meters long, surrounding the ground around him. Any ferocious beasts that came within 30 meters of him would turn into balls of fire, rolling on the ground and crying out agonizingly. This was the power of a level 29 superior divine weapon. It was almost like a conferred knight's helper. He could even sense the vision of the huge fire dragon and observe the scene in the distance. With just this Crimson Fire divine weapon, Holt would be able to control it to roam around the entire maze, killing any ferocious beasts and even creating unimaginable obstacles for the students. Moreover, Holt had yet to include his strongest killing technique. However, he did not do so. He merely stroked Crimson Fire's head, the corners of his lips curling up as he mumbled, "This is the regional selection. It should be a battle of wits and courage. If you were to go out and crush everything, how boring would that be?" Some people were at ease, able to persevere till the end even if they just stood there without moving. However, there were also people who were driven mad by the attacks from the beast stampede. F***CK. 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 Shouting loudly, the shadow death god Anderson swung his shadow tooth, bringing up streams of black afterimages as he slashed the ferocious beasts one after another onto the ground. His speed was extremely fast and his aim was excellent. Moreover, the shadow tooth in his hand had the ability to convert power into a spiral force. Any ferocious beast that came into contact with it would have their skin and flesh lacerated, instantly leaving bloody holes on their bodies. Although Anderson could easily kill tens of ferocious beasts just by using the shadow tooth and his basic skills, he did not feel relaxed at all. It was because at the end of his vision, the densely packed ferocious beasts that seemed to have blocked off the entire maze's corridors were flooding over like a tidal wave. Even the walls of the labyrinth were crawling with all sorts of ferocious beasts. There were level 12 giant wolves, level 15 raging bears, and level 19 clouded leopards. The densely packed group of ferocious monsters roared as they charged toward Anderson with bloodshot eyes. However, what made Anderson break out in a cold sweat was a monster surrounded by electricity. It looked like the amalgamation of a lion and a tiger. It was 5 meters tall and 10 meters long, and its head broke through the height of the maze. It was walking slowly toward him. It was a level 20 ferocious beast, Thunderroar. F***CK. What's going on? Why are all the ferocious beasts running towards me? Of course, Anderson did not know that because he stayed in the stronghold near Fang Xinjian, the pressure he felt was the greatest after Fang Xinjian. Moreover, the Shadow Death God was not good at group battles, so it took him a lot of effort to kill the ferocious beast. Many ice dragons kept on diving down to the ground. With just a casual flick of their bodies, they could crush up to 100 ferocious beasts into meat paste. They were here to pick up the examinees from the strongholds near Fang Xinjian. In fact, other than Fang Xinjian and Andrusen, all the other examinees in the central region of the maze had either lost their battle prowess or had surrendered. They had been ranked lower in the first stage, so it was even more impossible for them to fend off the waves of ferocious beasts. On the spectator's stand, Lilia gritted her teeth and said, "This damned David! To think that he would use such despicable methods! I'm going to cut off his balls and stuff them into his mouth." Cold sweat broke out on the back of cursed city lord's head. Ferdinand and the others also subconsciously took a step back, grumbling inwardly, without Fang Xinjian by her side, this Lilia has completely become the violent girl she was before. No, she seems to have become even more violent. However, Ferdinand also started to worry. He looked in the direction of the center of the maze and saw that Fang Xinjian was holding on to the stick. With a wave of his hand, several hundred streams of sword cheese shot out in all directions, blocking almost all the ferocious beasts 10 meters away from them. Any ferocious beasts that were slightly stronger would be instantly slashed into pieces by the streams of invisible slashes the moment they got within 10 meters of Fang Xinjian. But even so, everyone could tell that the monsters were getting closer to Fang Xinjian, inch by inch. Moreover, a large number of corpses were squeezed together, almost forming a small mountain of flesh within 10 meters of Fang Xinjian. In the blink of an eye, the corpses of the monsters had piled up to a height of over 1 meter. If this were to go on, even if Fang Xinjian could still hold on, he would be drowned by the corpses. Moreover, everyone knew that Fang Xinjian's stamina could not possibly be limitless. It was even more impossible for him to perform those invisible slashes as he wished. However, the most serious thing was that a few hundred meters away, there were a total of 4 level 20 ferocious beasts following behind the herd. They were observing Fang Xinjian while slowly getting closer to Fang Xinjian. 4 level 20 ferocious beasts. Seeing this scene, even Ferdinand, who was extremely confident in Fang Xinjian, could not help but feel worried. 4 level 20 ferocious beasts. Even a level 20 conferred knight would have to spend quite a bit of effort, right? Xinjian should be able to get rid of one of them, but the other 3, the most troublesome ones are the ferocious beasts that are level 20 and above. They will gradually gain some intelligence and won't be like ordinary ferocious beasts who only know how to charge and bite. Just then, the spectators gasped once again. A black silhouette dashed up into the sky, and 3 ice dragons headed out to seal off the black silhouette. The black silhouette collided fiercely with the 3 ice dragons that had descended from the sky. With a loud rumble, it was as if thunder had struck out of nowhere, and the 3 huge dragons were sent tumbling out, only coming to a stop several tens of meters away. That black silhouette also plunged down to the ground like a meteor. With a dull thud, it smashed onto the floor of the maze. If it was not because the maze had been created by the divine-level expert, the melancholic monarch, making it indestructible, this attack would probably have caused an earthquake and created a huge crater. That black silhouette scratched its head, and at the next moment, a towering fury flashed in its eyes. It leaped up to the top of the maze's walls and kept hitting its chest toward the sky, letting out maniacal bellows. Ripples that could be seen by the naked eye were released from its mouth. Even though they were separated by a great distance, the spectators on the stands could still feel a dull pain in their eardrums. It could be seen how powerful the strange black silhouette's lung capacity was, and how astonishing its ability to breathe was. At this moment, everyone recognized the strange silhouette's identity. It was a monster that was covered in black fur and looked like an orangutan. The monster had a height of 3 meters, and each of its feet were as thick and sturdy as steel pillars. The greatest difference between it and the orangutan was that one had a scarf-like ring around its neck, while the other had a pair of extremely thick and huge palms that were covered in layers of crystalline substances. That's the colossal armed ape. A level 21 ferocious beast. Is it the only level 21 ferocious beast in the maze? How powerful! To think that it can go up against the governor's 3 ice dragons and not die. It must have wanted to escape earlier, but was stopped by the governor. Just then, the colossal armed ape's furious bellows ended, as if it knew that it was unable to escape. Extreme fury flashed in its eyes, and it turned to look in Fang Xinjian's direction. It sniffed fiercely, and at the next moment, it let out a deafening bellow toward the sky and dashed over. Look, it's dashing toward Fang Xinjian. Treja Clan Xiao Yi could not help but laugh out loud. It was as if the scene of the colossal armed ape tearing Fang Xinjian apart had already flashed past his mind. Chapter 219. However, at the next moment, Xiao Yi shook his head slightly and thought to himself, Fang Xinjian isn't an idiot. If he really can't do it, he'll definitely surrender. But this is good as well. He failed the regional selection and won't be able to go through the second transition and become a conferred knight. It'll be even easier for Lord Adri to deal with him. When Lilia, cursed city lord, Ferdinand, and the others saw this scene, they also revealed astonished expressions. Most of the spectators did not think well of Fang Xinjian's ending either. A level 21 ferocious beast and 4 level 20 ferocious beasts. Fang Xinjian is finished. But if he were to use the move he used yesterday, he'd have a chance to kill the colossal armed ape, right? So what if he killed it? Did you see how tired Fang Xinjian was after using that move yesterday? How is he going to deal with the remaining 4 level 20 ferocious beasts with his remaining stamina? The colossal armed ape was too powerful. With a punch, it was able to kill tens of ferocious beasts across space. With a casual dash, it was able to leave no corpses or bones in the 100-meter-long corridor, smashing all the ferocious beasts it passed by into meat paste. It dashed wildly all the way, and there were no ferocious beasts that could delay the colossal armed ape for even a second. Its sturdy body was like that of an empire's divine weapon, with a terrifying strength of over 200 points, and its hands, which were covered in layers of crystals, were like scales with the toughness of an inferior divine weapon. These were level 21 ferocious beasts. They might not have the strange and powerful killing techniques of conferred knights, but they had the most terrifying and violent physical attributes and toughness. Seeing the colossal armed ape knock through the beast tide like a tank, charging in the direction of Fang Xinjian, the countenances of cursed city lord, Lilia, and Ferdinand turned grim. Seeing the colossal armed ape's performance, the people on the platform became even more pessimistic about Fang Xinjian. Just then, the colossal armed ape passed by a level 20 ferocious beast. It was a terrifying monster with 3 heads, a lion, a tiger, and a wolf. Its 4 claws were like those of a lizard, and it was over 6 meters tall. It was a level 20 ferocious beast, the lion-tiger beast. However, in front of the 3-meter-tall colossal armed ape, such a huge creature retreated while trembling. The colossal armed ape did not let him off. It dashed to the front of the liger beast, opened its palm, and grabbed at the liger beast's tail. Although the lion-tiger beast was afraid of the other party's attack, it couldn't just sit and wait for death. With a furious roar, its 3 heads opened their mouths wide and released a flame current, cold wind, and acid respectively. However, the colossal armed ape only let out a wild roar amidst the 3 breaths, allowing the flames and cold wind to sweep past its body. It was as if it had just taken a bath. The acid dripped onto its body, but it did not even leave behind a single mark. On the contrary, it grabbed hold of the liger beast's body and exerted strength in its arms. As its muscles swelled up, it flung the liger beast, which weighed over 50 tons, out like a pile of trash. With a loud rumble, the liger beast was flung fiercely onto the ground as if it had been slapped into a flatbread. A series of explosive sounds rang out from its body, and its 3 heads let out a series of agonized howls as it spat out large mouthfuls of blood. His tail was unable to withstand the colossal armed ape's immense strength, and was torn into two by the power. With just one move, it had taken care of a level 20 ferocious beast. After the colossal armed ape had severely injured its opponent, it let out an excited howl and threw away the broken tail in its hands, pouncing onto the liger beast's back. Boom, boom, boom. Punch after punch landed on the liger beast's body. The colossal armed ape's fists were like two pile drivers, pounding on the liger beast's body crazily. Under the pressure of this force, the entire area within a 100-meter radius seemed to be welcoming a magnitude 5 earthquake. Amidst the crazy tremors, if it were not for the fact that the maze was sturdy enough, a large portion of it would have collapsed long ago. After smashing the liger beast's body into meat paste, the colossal armed ape's body was covered in minced meat and blood. The colossal armed ape let out an enraged roar in excitement and continued to pat its chest with both hands. The next moment, it leaped lightly once again and charged toward Fang Xinjian. On Fang Xinjian's side, the area within 10 to 20 meters around him was already covered in blood. The corpses were piled up to a height of about 3 meters, and the monsters continued to step on the corpses, pouncing toward Fang Xinjian from top to bottom. And when the new pile of corpses was high enough, the monsters at the back could pounce on Fang Xinjian even closer. These monster hordes were using their lives to pile up the corpses, inching closer and closer to Fang Xinjian. At the same time, the colossal armed ape charged over, its speed getting increasingly faster and faster. In the blink of an eye, it had already broken through the sound barrier and continued to accelerate, charging over like a cannonball. With a single thought from Fang Xinjian, 10 streams of ether sword ripples slashed out in all directions with 5 times the strength and 10 times the speed of sound. They slashed all the corpses in the surroundings into dust, and the high temperature effect instantly set most of the corpses ablaze, turning them into ashes bit by bit. After clearing up a circle of corpses, Fang Xinjian continued to wave the sticks in his hand unhurriedly. His movements seemed to be leisurely, but in reality they were extremely fast. Any ferocious beast that came within 10 meters of him would be killed instantly, without exception. The area within 10 meters was the range of his heaven's perception. To him, he could see everything down to the smallest detail. With such powerful senses and his astonishing speed, nothing would be able to get past this line of defense. However, the colossal armed ape had already accelerated to 3 times the speed of sound. In almost 0.3 seconds, it had already traversed through the area of countless mazes and was about to appear before Fang Xinjian in an instant. It was at the moment when it broke through the sound barrier that a hint of astonishment appeared in the eyes of all the spectators. In that instant, all of them realized a problem. Fang Xinjian was blind. If the colossal armed ape were to break through the sound barrier, it would be able to charge into the area within 10 meters of Fang Xinjian before Fang Xinjian could sense it. This meant that Fang Xinjian would only be able to discover the colossal armed ape when he was within 10 meters. To have a ferocious beast with a height of 2 to 3 meters, able to send several tens of tons of things flying with just a casual slap of its hand, and with a body that was impervious to all weapons and was like an empire's divine weapon. How thrilling and dangerous would it be? And how difficult would it be to react within this short 10 meters, push back, or even kill the colossal armed ape? Could Fang Xinjian really do it? In the 0.3 seconds that the colossal armed ape had broken through, all the spectators became nervous. However, the time was too short. They had only seen a slight change in their gazes. Before they could say a single word, the colossal armed ape was about to charge into the area within 10 meters of Fang Xinjian in one go. Lilia's gaze was filled with worry, Cursed City Lord's gaze was filled with seriousness, and Ferdinand was a little lacking in confidence. Treja Clan's Xiao Yi's eyes were filled with joy. Even Governor Devitt, who was in the air, was prepared to rescue Fang Xinjian. However, at the next moment, the colossal armed ape charged into the area within 10 meters of Fang Xinjian at a speed that was 4 times the speed of sound, a speed that could tear a knight into pieces within 0.1 seconds. Fang Xinjian let everyone present know what true speed was. Chapter 220. How fast could a human be? The speed of public buses in modern times was about 10 meters per second. If one were to drive a Ferrari, their maximum speed could reach 101 meters per second. A passenger plane's speed could be maintained at 277 meters per second. The fastest fighter jet in the world could reach a speed of 935 meters per second. They could reach any place on Earth in 4 hours. Then what could be faster? Fang Xinjian's maximum speed was 10 times that of supersonic speed, which was about 3,400 meters per second. When the colossal armed ape dashed into Fang Xinjian's 10-meter domain, his heaven's perception transmitted this information to Fang Xinjian's brain at the first instance. About 7,000ths of a second later, the colossal armed ape would be able to smash its fist onto Fang Xinjian's head. Therefore, in the first 1,000th of a second, Fang Xinjian received this information and reacted. In the second 1,000th of a second, Fang Xinjian activated boundaries negation and watched the colossal armed ape get closer to him inch by inch. He could even see the tendrils of flesh wrapped around the colossal armed ape's body, see the lumps of blood on them, and also see a total of 122 rays of starlight flashing on its body. Those were the 122 flaws on its body. Fang Xinjian could sense that as long as he pierced the sticks among them, he would be able to dismember the colossal armed ape into 8 pieces. His unparalleled sword intent could slash through the Empire's divine weapons, let alone the colossal armed ape, whose bones were comparable to the Empire's divine weapons. Therefore, in the next 2,000ths of a second, Fang Xinjian's sticks was gradually covered in a layer of silver fog. It was the high-frequency effulgence weapon, Silver Fox. In the next 1,000th of a second, Fang Xinjian's arm started to move in the air with great difficulty. The sticks sliced through the atmosphere, bringing along a series of afterimages as it landed on a spot of light, followed by a second and a third. 122 swords appeared and disappeared in the next 1,000th of a second. Cursed City Lord, Lilia, and Ferdinand could only see a series of flashing sword light flowers in their eyes. Then, Fang Xinjian took a slight step forward and moved away from the colossal armed ape's body. Sonic booms, airwaves, sparks, and sword lights dazzled everyone's eyes. The ordinary audience could only see a flash of light. Fang Xinjian was still standing in his original spot, while the colossal armed ape had already passed his body and landed heavily on the ground. Roar! With a roar of despair, hundreds of arrows of blood shot out from all over his body. Then, accompanied by his roar of despair, his entire body was torn apart and turned into minced meat on the ground. Under everyone's shocked gazes, a foot about the size of half the colossal armed ape's eyeball stepped lightly on the colossal armed ape's head that had flown out. Fang Xinjian looked at the giant ape with a curious expression as it opened its eyes, its mouth maintaining its final roar. He suddenly raised his hand, and the sword light swept past, directly cutting open the giant ape's skull. He suddenly wanted to taste the gorilla brain. It was as if he had suddenly realized that delicacies could bring him a little bit of happiness. To Fang Xinjian, who had not felt any happiness for a year and a half, this kind of happiness was like a clear spring in the desert. It made him want to try all sorts of delicacies. Therefore, it was like how he could kill people whenever he wanted in the past. But now, he wanted to eat the gorilla brain. Therefore, he cut open the colossal armed ape's skull and poked a finger into its brain. It felt a little like tofu pudding. Fang Xinjian stirred it for a while and then licked his finger. This taste is really amazing. When Fang Xinjian killed the colossal armed ape with a single move, the ferocious beasts in the surroundings had already stopped in their tracks. When they saw Fang Xinjian start to eat the gorilla brain, some of the ferocious beasts started to retreat slowly. The remaining 3 level 20 ferocious beasts saw Fang Xinjian lick the gorilla brain and then suddenly tap out with a finger, using the high temperature of the ether sword ripples to roast the brain. They instantly shuddered and fled in all directions. The ferocious beasts started to retreat. However, as Fang Xinjian roasted the gorilla brain with one hand, his other hand continued to tap out over 10 streams of sword cheese, slashing off the hind legs of over 10 ferocious beasts and making them stay. Of course, he would not make the mistake of not killing any ferocious beasts for 10 minutes and be eliminated. When Governor Devitt saw Fang Xinjian start to roast the gorilla brain, he suddenly felt an uncomfortable feeling in his stomach. Not to mention the spectators on the stage. It was unknown to the entire miracle world, but there was no one in the entire empire who would eat the brains of animals, especially when the colossal armed ape was so similar to humans. Eating its gorilla brain was like watching someone eat a human brain. Countless aristocratic students were so shocked that their faces turned pale, and they vomited. Ferdinand's countenance also turned pale, and he subconsciously touched his head, saying, "Hey, so Xinjian has such a heavy taste?" Cursed City Lord also frowned slightly. Eating brains was really too disgusting. Not to mention that they were on the battlefield, and he had even relied on this to scare off the other ferocious beasts. Lilia, on the other hand, was staring in Fang Xinjian's direction, and a hint of transparent liquid flowed down from the corner of her lips. She suddenly asked, "Are brains very tasty?" Cursed City Lord's countenance changed, and he quickly said, "That's something only barbarians do. Lily, you mustn't eat it." Of course, it was disgusting, but this disgust was built on absolute power. Killing a level 21 ferocious beast with a single sword attack, and then slicing open its skull to eat the gorilla brain. Right now, in everyone's eyes, Fang Xinjian was not only powerful, but also terrifying. Treja Xiuyi's countenance also turned slightly pale, feeling disgusted and terrified. Next to him, Zhou Yong said, trembling, "Senior Marshal Brother, the clan head and the others have not been able to find Kaunitz's corpse. Initially, they were very hopeful that he was not dead, but by the looks of it now, could it be, shut up!" Xiuyi immediately stopped Zhou Yong, saying furiously, "Don't say things that are impossible." However, looking at the sweat on the back of his head, it was clear that he was really scared. At this moment, after being shaken by Fang Xinjian, Xiuyi suddenly had a feeling that he should not go against Fang Xinjian in the future. Otherwise, if he were to, as the ferocious beasts around Fang Xinjian dispersed, the battle in the maze resumed. However, in that period of time earlier, all the ferocious beasts had gathered towards Fang Xinjian, allowing him to kill over 2/3 of the beasts. With that, many people in the surroundings of the maze had no beasts to kill. Many people were eliminated within the next 10 minutes. Rhoda, who had persisted in killing, Manny, who had left behind crippled ferocious beasts, Holt, who could freely control the crimson flames, and Anderson, who had spent a great deal of effort to finally kill a level 20 ferocious beast, were naturally not eliminated. However, there were even more people like Hamel, who had dodged the ferocious beast's attacks. In the end, there was nothing left to kill, and they could only be eliminated. Of course, as the one who had initiated the plan, David had long known that the ferocious beasts would leave due to an outburst. Therefore, he had left a few level 4 and level 5 ferocious beasts by his side to take turns to kill. Just like that, as the number of ferocious beasts continued to decrease, more and more people were eliminated as they were unable to kill a ferocious beast within 10 minutes. Of course, there were also over 10 unlucky people who surrendered after encountering the remaining 3 level 20 ferocious beasts. Finally, due to Fang Xinjian's massacre, the battle in the maze ended faster than expected. When there were only 50 people left in the maze, Governor Devitt announced the end of the competition. Chapter 221. Humph humph, this time around I've killed several hundred ferocious beasts in one go, and even killed a level 20 big guy. Anderson sat on Governor Devitt's ice dragon and slowly descended outside the maze. He kept thinking to himself, with this, there shouldn't be anyone more eye-catching than me in the entire second stage, right? However, just as he was thinking this, he saw that Fang Xinjian was already standing at the entrance of the maze, with a large pile of meat with black fur on it behind him. Many people were surrounding Fang Xinjian, talking to him. The feeling of being surrounded by stars made Shadow Death God Anderson feel extremely jealous. What's going on? Why are they surrounding Fang Xinjian? Anderson frowned and suddenly looked carefully at the mountain of meat behind Fang Xinjian. He blinked and said, "That is," Holt said, "a colossal armed ape. Why? Doesn't the Shadow Death God have the means to observe from afar? You didn't see that battle?" Anderson obviously would not say that he had focused all his attention on the level 20 ferocious beast. How could he have had the energy to observe other places? He just mumbled, "To think that he killed a level 21 ferocious beast. And it was an instant kill." Holt said, "Haha, seems like this time around, the one fighting with me for first place isn't you, but Fang Xinjian. He's just lucky." Anderson's countenance was a little grim as he looked at the colossal armed ape's corpse. Although his words were still very tough, he had a faint feeling that he might really not be a match for Fang Xinjian. How can this be? My Shadow Death God's growth is a +5 in strength, +7 in agility, +5 in reaction, +5 in physique, and +5 in flexibility. This has completely surpassed the growth of a windstorm sword hero. I can even turn into a shadow and move around, and use the shadow coffin to weaken my opponent's defense. And my killing technique. How can I be weaker than a windstorm sword hero? Putting Anderson aside, David was also looking at Fang Xinjian in disbelief, as if he had seen a ghost. As if sensing David through the sword cheese, Fang Xinjian turned his face over. Seeing the sinister smile on Fang Xinjian's face, David subconsciously lowered his head, not daring to meet his gaze. How could this be? He can actually defeat a level 21 ferocious beast? How is this possible? David could only console himself, it's fine. The third stage, the Pantheon Monument observation, tests one's talent. It has nothing to do with one's battle prowess. Fang Xinjian might be eliminated. However, even he found it hard to believe his own words. Fang Xinjian was a genius who had attained heaven's perception at the age of 17. In terms of talent, there was no way David could surpass him. He could only return to his dormitory dejectedly, starting to worry about the upcoming regional selection and Fang Xinjian. Hamel sighed and said, "I've been eliminated. I'll be leaving now. I wish you all good luck and good result." Looking at Fang Xinjian, Manny, and Rhoda, disappointment filled Hamel's eyes. Rhoda said, "There are too many strong people in this batch. I don't know how much longer I can hold on either. Just take it that you're returning to Cursed to wait for me." "I didn't say that I'm returning to Cursed." Hamel smiled and said, "I still need to cheer for you guys." On the spectators' stand, Lilia smiled and let out a breath. She patted her chest and said, "I was so nervous earlier. I almost thought that something would happen to Teacher." Cursed City Lord frowned and did not say a word. It was because he realized that Fang Xinjian's speed had probably completely surpassed his. This meant that if Fang Xinjian wanted to leave, he might not be able to hold him back. He was a conferred knight, a level 25 conferred knight. And he's only at the first transition. The remaining 50 knights returned to the canteen and dormitory to rest, preparing for the third stage the next day, Pantheon Monument observation. Excitement flashed in the eyes of countless people. Pantheon Monument observation, comprehending the martial arts of a divine-level expert. How exciting was this? There were a total of 8 Pantheon monuments in the Empire, one for each regional academy. They had all been created by the 8 divine-level experts who had founded the empire. The one in the Great Western region had naturally been created by the melancholic monarch, and the martial arts on it were also the melancholic monarch. However, the knights who had stayed behind today had all fought hard in the maze and had naturally exhausted a lot of their energy. Although they were very excited to be able to observe the Pantheon Monument observation the next day, they still had to eat. Moreover, not only was the canteen in the regional academy free, the food was good, and the ingredients were precious heavenly and earthly treasures as well as ferocious beasts. Manny, Fang Xinjian, and Rhoda once again sat down at the table. Fang Xinjian looked at Manny and said, "I heard that you've also observed the Pantheon Monument during the previous regional selection?" Manny smiled and nodded, saying, "The Pantheon Monument. The information left behind by divine-level experts is on it. For this stage, you and Wei Lung, who have attained heaven's perception, will definitely have the greatest advantage. It's said that for the martial arts on the Pantheon Monument, if you have outstanding talent, you'll be able to comprehend a set of martial arts. If your talent is 1 in 10,000, then you'll be able to comprehend the second level of transformation, and the martial arts you comprehend will evolve. If your talent is hard to come by even in 100 years, then you'll have the chance to comprehend the third level of transformation. It's a pity that I've only been able to comprehend the second level at most. There probably won't be any changes this time around. As for the changes after the third level, I'm even less sure." Just as the two of them were talking, plates of huge grilled meat, red braised pork, black pepper steak, meat soup, meat burgers, and many others were served. Rhoda frowned and asked, "Why are the dishes today different from yesterday's? And they're all big meats?" Fang Shijian grabbed a piece of black pepper steak and started eating it. The entire steak was very tender, showing that the chef had a good grasp of meat quality. It was neither too dry nor too raw, and coupled with the prominent black pepper flavor, the corners of Fang Xinjian's lips curled up uncontrollably. After eating a piece of steak, he said, "I want them to make some dishes out of that colossal armed ape. We can't possibly let a level 21 ferocious beast go to waste, right?" In that instant, Rhoda and Manny both felt a sense of disgust. It was quite difficult for them to eat a colossal armed ape. Just then, another 2 huge egg-like objects were served. Manny asked, puzzled, "Do colossal armed apes lay eggs?" "These aren't eggs. They're eyeballs. I got the chef to specially make them." Fang Xinjian casually grabbed the eyeball and bit into it. In an instant, a spicy taste exploded in his mouth. This was probably the chef's first time making the colossal armed ape's eyes. He had used a large amount of spices, chili, sesame oil, and other ingredients to cover up the fishy taste, making it both fragrant and spicy. At the same time, the eyeball's smoothness and chewiness made Fang Xinjian nod uncontrollably after eating it. "Aren't you guys eating?" Manny and Rhoda immediately shook their heads. When the other knights saw Fang Xinjian eating these things, they could not help but frown. A few of them even had their mouths agape, as if they had seen something terrifying. Just then, another skewer of sliced sausages was served. Rhoda let out a breath, thinking that a normal dish had finally been served. She used her fork to pick up a piece of sausage and started eating. However, after a few bites she said, "Why is this sausage so old? Why is there a stench?" Fang Xinjian said calmly, "That's not a sausage. That's the one below the colossal armed ape." Fang Xinjian, "I'm going to kill you." All right. Rhoda, put down your spear. Xinjian didn't do it on purpose. But look at him. To think that he's still eating. I'm going to burn them. Just like that, after eating and drinking their fill, another night passed. Fang Xinjian and the others finally welcomed the third stage of the regional selection, the Pantheon Monument observation. Chapter 222. Under the guidance of the examiners, the 50 examinees arrived at a huge bronze hall. It was unknown how this bronze hall was built, but every inch of it was forged from red copper. It was seamless and formed in one piece. The moment they entered the bronze hall, the examinees felt a solemn and sacred aura gushing toward them. In front of them was an incomparably vast hall filled with candles. There was not a single pillar in the entire hall. There was only a hunched old man with white hair and wrinkles on his face that were like ravines standing in front of the pillar. He looked even older than one of the examiners for the previous 2 stages, the Commissioner of Education Luke. His clothes looked like they were rotten, like the white cloth wrapped around a mummy's body. Even after all the examinees had entered the hall, the old man continued to look in front of him, at the gray stone monument. The stone monument was a square stone monument that was 10 meters wide, 10 meters tall, and 10 meters long. The 4 sides of the stone monument were filled with different pictures, while the top and bottom sides were empty. Looking at the extremely huge Pantheon monument, everyone's hearts were filled with solemnity. The old man's eyes were fixed on the stone monument, as if he was in a trance. It was only when the examinees were within 30 meters of the stone monument that he spoke slowly. The old man's hoarse voice was like a saw sawing wood. He spoke slowly. "You guys are the knights participating in the regional selection this time around, right? The Pantheon monument is guarded by me, and Devitt and the others are not allowed to enter casually. You guys have 12 hours to comprehend the Pantheon monument. Once the 12 hours are up, go out. They'll be waiting for you outside. Also, remember, you're only allowed to look and not touch. As for the profoundness of the Pantheon monument, although the examiners and your teachers have probably already told you about it, I'll still tell you again according to the rules. Back then, the melancholic monarch left behind a lot of information on the Pantheon monument, using the method of injecting information into ether particles. After all, everything in the world is formed from ether particles. It's only natural that the melancholic monarch left his martial arts comprehension in the ether particles that form the Pantheon monument. Therefore, the melancholic monarch left behind his martial arts legacy on the Pantheon monument. Everyone will be able to comprehend a set of martial arts based on their own comprehension. However, comprehending martial arts is only the first level of comprehension. Only when you have a deeper understanding of the second level will you be able to evolve your skills and make your martial arts comprehension more complete. Different comprehensions and solutions will allow one to comprehend different martial arts, and the limits of each martial art are also different. Some martial arts can be completed by comprehending the second layer of the profound mystery, while others need to comprehend the third layer of the profound mystery to comprehend the complete martial art. There are even fourth and fifth layers. Of course, the more profound the martial arts can be comprehended, the more powerful it will be. However, the current highest record is Devitt's comprehension of the fourth level. As for the choice of solution and martial arts, it all depends on your own understanding. Everyone's understanding is different, so the martial arts and limits that you understand are also different. With that, the old man stopped talking and focused all his attention on the Pantheon monument. It was as if he only had eyes for the profoundness of the Pantheon monument. Manny used his reduced force field to tremble the air carefully and sent a voice transmission. "This is the governor from 2 years ago. Since 20 years ago, he has been staying here at the Pantheon monument, not taking a single step away from the inscriptions." Fang Xinjian nodded and saw that the others had already walked up, looking at the Pantheon monument with curious, astonished, and excited gazes. David was the first to walk up. With 2 dark circles under his eyes, he looked at the Pantheon monument agitatedly, starting to work hard to comprehend the profoundness within. After seeing Fang Xinjian's performance in killing the colossal armed ape, he had not been able to sleep for the entire night, feeling extremely pressured. It was because Fang Xinjian's performance in the first 2 stages had given him too much pressure. Although he was not a conferred knight, he had a battle prowess that was close to that of a conferred knight. How could he not feel pressured? Moreover, he had already become Fang Xinjian's archenemy. Therefore, he was very attentive and focused on looking at the images on the Pantheon monument. However, the more he did so, the more frustrated he felt. His mind was filled with images of Fang Xinjian, of how he had embarrassed himself at the 100-blossom banquet, and of how Fang Xinjian had shattered the steel pillar and killed the colossal armed ape. The more this was the case, the harder it was for him to calm down and comprehend the Pantheon monument. He felt a tightness in his chest and was unable to comprehend anything. However, the more he was unable to comprehend anything, the more frustrated he felt. In the blink of an eye, he was already covered in sweat. On the other side, Manny walked slowly up to the Pantheon monument. His expression was relaxed. After all, he had already comprehended the Pantheon monument once and knew that the second level of transformation was basically his limit. Therefore, he did not plan on forcing himself too much. Rhoda did not start to comprehend the Pantheon monument the moment she went up. It was because this was the first time she had seen the Pantheon monument, and it was also the first time she was participating in the regional selection. She was too agitated and her heart was beating too fast to remain calm even if Mount Tai were to collapse. The more important the matter was, the more one had to maintain their composure and not be flustered. Therefore, she knew that the more important the manual and the more profound the martial arts, the more she could not be too hasty. Otherwise, it would be like more haste, less speed. Being impatient was a great taboo when comprehending martial art. Therefore, looking at the examinees who were rushing up, she smiled and shook her head. Then she sat down cross-legged and closed her eyes to rest. She did not cultivate, nor did she think about complicated matters. She only needed to calm her mind and focus, allowing herself to settle down before she started to comprehend the Pantheon monument seriously, calmly, and energetically. However, compared to the other examinees who had to close their eyes to rest and stabilize their minds, Anderson and Holt were clearly better. They did not feel nervous or agitated at all. Anderson was an unquestionable genius. To be able to transition into the Shadow Death God, which no one in the Empire had succeeded in for the past 200 years, how could he not be a genius? Moreover, having a photographic memory was one of his basic abilities. He walked one round around the Pantheon monument and memorized all the scratches, pictures, and colors on it without missing a single detail. He then closed his eyes, and the pictures on all four sides of the Pantheon monument were disassembled, assembled, replaced, and even bent in his mind. It was as if he was a calculator. Holt's gaze was filled with unprecedented confidence. In his eyes, everything on the monument was extremely clear. The many scratches were the trajectories of the stars, the many dots were the most dazzling stars, and the colors were the various strong winds and gang-chis from beyond the heavens. Master was right. The melancholic monarch has indeed received our myriad stars palace's legacy. This Pantheon monument of his records the star chart of the primordial stars. This star chart can complement my myriad stars meditation art, and there's hope for me to attain heaven's perception. Holt looked at the Pantheon monument with a burning gaze, as if he was thirsty for it. In a mere few minutes, he seemed to be able to see the collision of countless stars, the shooting of light rays, and the explosions of geomagnetic forces in his mind. Those were the information left behind by the divine-level expert on the Pantheon monument, and they were being transmitted directly into his mind. It was as if he was in virtual reality, allowing him to view the stars in the universe. Gradually, a set of mental cultivation method by the name of Astral Sword took form on his stats window. In the eyes of others, Holt's entire body suddenly flashed with spots of faint light. It was a sign that he had succeeded in comprehending the Pantheon monument. The various lights represented that the ether particles, which formed the Pantheon monument, had carried information and flowed into the cultivator's body. This meant that he had succeeded in comprehending it. This was a method left behind by the divine-level expert, the melancholic monarch, to differentiate the cultivator's level of comprehension. As long as one had succeeded in comprehending the Pantheon monument, they would be able to display such a phenomenon within a day. The old man, who had been immersed in the profoundness of the Pantheon monument, suddenly opened his eyes wide and stared at Holt, who was in a state of comprehension. So fast? How many minutes has it only been? To think that he has already comprehended the profoundness of the Pantheon monument? This Pantheon monument contains countless secrets. Everyone's perspective of thinking and their method of comprehension are different. However, there has never been anyone who has been able to comprehend it so quickly. How on earth did he do it? I wonder how he comprehended the Pantheon monument, what kind of method did he use, what martial arts he comprehended, and how many levels did he comprehend. All the participants who were looking at Holt were filled with envy, jealousy, and hatred. To think that he had managed to comprehend the profoundness of the Pantheon monument in less than 5 minutes. How terrifying was his talent! Seeing this scene, Anderson let out a cold snort, feeling that the white light was extremely piercing to the eyes. He had already closed his eyes and continued to comprehend the memories in his mind. The various pieces of information continued to be rearranged and rearranged, coming up with all sorts of results. Under Holt's agitation, David and the others became even more nervous and anxious. However, the more nervous they were, the more their minds were in a mess, and they were unable to analyze anything. Half an hour later, Wei Ling, who had stepped into Heaven's perception, also started to flash with light spots. Through the information gathered through Heaven's perception, he had also comprehended the martial arts from the Pantheon monument. Just then, as Fang Xinjian looked at the Pantheon monument, a series of familiar feelings kept on flashing in his mind. Chapter 223. Heaven's perception allowed Fang Xinjian to see within a 10-meter radius. Therefore, although he was blind, he could still clearly see the pictures on the 4 sides of the Pantheon monument. At the start, he only felt that the pictures on the Pantheon monument were somewhat familiar. However, when he saw a picture that looked like a spoon, his heart skipped a beat. Big Dipper? He started to recall the many constellations and star charts on Earth. He had learned about this a few years ago when he was still in school. However, his memory of it was already very blurry. However, Fang Xinjian was after all a knight whose mental cultivation method had reached level 5. His brain's memory and calculation abilities far surpassed those of the past. Although the memories regarding the star charts were very distant, they were still in his mind. He was like a computer, slowly retrieving all the memories regarding the star charts in the past. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 10 minutes. After half an hour, he started to recall bit by bit. Gradually, he recalled the lesson from about 5 years ago where the geography teacher had explained about the star charts and constellations. Although this memory was still hidden in his brain, it was already very blurry and it was impossible for him to recall it. However, the level 5 mental cultivation method had allowed his brain's memory, calculation abilities, and thinking abilities to increase tremendously. After spending half an hour trying to recall, he actually managed to recall it. Not only did he recall the simple introduction his teacher had given him back then, he even recalled the rough appearance of the 4 star charts on the PowerPoint. Ursa Minor, Ursa Major, Cassiopeia, Draco. Many constellations appeared in his mind, and then they gradually overlapped with the Pantheon monument before him. The 4 sides of the Pantheon monument were star charts. They were the star charts of the 4 seasons. The stars of the 4 seasons, spring, summer, autumn, and winter, were drawn on the 4 charts respectively. But why is it that the star charts on the Pantheon monument are the same as the ones I've seen on Earth? No, they seem to be a little incomplete. Despite that, they're still the same. Many questions flashed in Fang Xinjian's mind. Could it be that the melancholic monarch from 200 years ago had already gone to Earth? Or could it be? Just as Fang Xinjian was recollecting, pondering, and observing the star chart on the Pantheon monument, Anderson let out a long whistle. He had comprehended the first level of the Pantheon monument's profoundness. White light spots appeared on his body, and a set of martial arts appeared on his stats window. Fang Xinjian used his heaven's perception to take a look and then ignored him. Right now, all of his attention was attracted by the Pantheon monument before him. This Pantheon monument was created by a divine-level expert from the Empire 200 years ago. No matter where the starry sky on it comes from, it represents the connection between Earth and Miracle World. It definitely far surpasses the 17 years that I originally thought. 17 years ago, the gateway to Miracle World had been opened in Demonic City. The entire Demonic City had been invaded by an alternate world, and the two worlds had merged together in a small area. From there, all sorts of stories, experts, clans, and legends had been born. During these 17 years, the entire world had changed. Countless countries had joined forces to develop Miracle World's powers, and they had even gradually joined forces with the three mage kings, starting to infiltrate Miracle World. However, today, Fang Xinjian suddenly discovered that the connection between Miracle World and Earth had not been as short as 17 years. It could be traced back to 200 years ago. How astonishing was this! On the other side, Manny had once again immersed himself in comprehending the Pantheon monument. His body first emitted spots of light, and then a circle of light appeared above his head. It represented that he had comprehended the second level of the Pantheon monument's profoundness. Of course, Manny had already comprehended the Pantheon monument in the past. Therefore, no one found his performance strange. Right now, there were already 3 people who had comprehended the Pantheon monument's profoundness: Holt, Wei Ling, and Manny, who were at level 2, who had comprehended the Pantheon monument's profoundness. This caused the old man who was guarding the monument to nod inwardly. This batch is really a gathering of geniuses. To think that there are already people who have comprehended the Pantheon monument's profoundness so quickly. However, the Pantheon monument contains endless profoundness. Everyone's views are different, and their methods of comprehending it are also different. The limits that they can reach are also different. Currently, the highest method of comprehending it is still the heavenly origin solution that Devitt had left behind 30 years ago. He had comprehended the 4th level of profoundness, and the killing technique he cultivated had evolved 3 times consecutively, resulting in the current 100 Dragons Ice incantation. Based on the heavenly origin solution, we think that the limits of the Pantheon monument should be around the 5th or 6th level. The old man's greatest wish was to be able to decipher all the profoundness that the melancholic monarch had left behind on the Pantheon monument back then. Only the correct method would be able to decipher all the profoundness on it and comprehend the melancholic monarch's true legacy. Although the heavenly origin solution that Devitt had comprehended had reached the 4th level, it was still not enough. This means that the heavenly origin solution is not the most correct method of comprehending it. White light suddenly burst out from Holt's body, forming a circle of light above his head. He had already comprehended the 2nd level of the Pantheon monument's profoundness. The astral sword had evolved into the Black Domain astral sword. The old man's face was filled with surprise, and then he looked at Holt with great anticipation. Holt's change once again stimulated all the other students. Everyone could not wait to focus on the Pantheon monument before them, wishing that they could take apart the inscriptions on the monument to take a look. Realizing that Holt had once again suppressed him, Anderson's face darkened. His brain started to operate at high speed. In his eyes, the scratches and the origin points were like the shadow changes under the sun, recording a set of extremely profound force exertion methods. As he continued to sense the information on the Pantheon monument, the images in his mind also seemed to become more three-dimensional. It's not just the exertion of force in the physical body. There's also the change in the footwork. The light spots on his body also started burning up fiercely, as if he would be able to attain a breakthrough at any moment. Rhoda, who was in the distance, let out a soft breath and stood up. She had already calmed her mind and was prepared to start studying the Pantheon monument before her. Feng Xinjian looked at the Pantheon monument before him and the star chart in his mind, which was getting increasingly clearer as he recalled it. Suddenly, he noticed some problems. Why is the star chart on the Pantheon monument incomplete? Everyone would be able to comprehend different martial arts from the Pantheon monument, and they would also be able to comprehend even more profoundness and evolve their martial arts. This is because the melancholic monarch had left a lot of information in the Pantheon monument. Based on Miracle World's theory, everything in the world was formed from ether particles, and the Pantheon monument was no exception. And when one's heaven's perception reached 100%, they would be able to leave the information they wanted in any object for thousands or even hundreds of years. The melancholic monarch had hidden many martial arts in the star chart. Based on one's understanding of the Pantheon monument, one would be able to comprehend different martial arts. The deeper one's comprehension of the martial arts would be, resulting in the phenomenon of the martial arts evolving. In the end, one would be able to completely master the complete set of martial arts. Different methods would allow one to comprehend different martial arts. Some martial arts would be completely comprehended at the second level, while some martial arts would only be completely perfected at the third level. The various levels of profoundness would allow the melancholic monarch to completely comprehend the martial arts he had hidden. Time and time again, the martial arts would become increasingly complete and eventually return to their original state. And the different methods of comprehension would result in the different limits of comprehension. This is because the martial arts one would obtain from the initial comprehension would be different. Some martial arts would be able to be perfected at the second level, while others would require the third or even the fourth level. The logic that Feng Xinjian had thought of was something that many people who studied the Pantheon monument had thought of long ago. However, the crux of the problem was that over the past 200 years or so, no one had been able to find the correct method to comprehend the Pantheon monument. At this moment, Feng Xinjian was thinking about the incomplete parts of the star chart on the Pantheon monument. He thought to himself, what would happen if I were to completely patch them up? Chapter 224. Feng Xinjian once again tried to recall the star charts he had seen in his geography lessons. There were a total of 4 star charts, each representing the different stars in the 4 seasons of spring, summer, autumn, and winter. As the memories were from too long ago, Feng Xinjian could no longer remember many of the details on the star charts. Therefore, in order to complete the star charts on the Pantheon monument, he had to recall all the details on Earth. His brain circulated intensely, and streams of bioelectricity stimulated his cranial nerves, turning those fragmented pieces of information into countless memory fragments before his eyes. You're not a member of our Feng clan. You be *starred. Beat him up. Everyone, let's beat him up together. Feng Xinjian frowned, but he did not stop his actions. He continued to rummage through his sea of memories, searching for the various memory fragments from the past. Grandmother, I want to learn martial arts. Martial arts? Who told you about learning martial arts? Why would you have this idea? I saw that uncle has been practicing martial arts. You don't have to learn martial arts. From tomorrow onwards, I'll send you to school. Study hard and your future will be 100 times brighter than practicing martial arts. Don't always think about martial arts. Also, you're not allowed to come to my study in the future. You don't know the rules at all. Feng Xinjian let out a deep breath and continued to rummage through his memory fragments. However, his fists were clenched tightly without him knowing, and his breathing became even heavier. Feng Xinjian, Aren't you going to change your clothes? I only have this set of clothes, haha, he's so smelly. Everyone, don't go near him. If we go near him, we'll be smelled too. Fang Xinjian pressed down hard on his forehead, feeling that the things before him were like a torrent of memories from the past. Some memory fragments that he had thought he had long since forgotten kept on surfacing, causing him to once again feel the grief, fury, and hatred from the past. Finally, his consciousness seemed to have sunk to an unfathomable level, a place where he had never recalled so deeply before. Are you sure it's this? The outcome of the seventh era has already been decided. What difference does it make who I choose? Fang Xinjian's hands tightened into fists, and there seemed to be the sound of swords clashing around him. Whose voice is that? Why is there a memory of this voice in my head? In the next moment, Fang Xinjian exhaled deeply and temporarily set aside the strange memories in his mind. This was because he had completely recovered his memories regarding the 4 seasons star chart, including the details of all the constellations on the chart. The entire process of recalling took Fang Xinjian a total of 2 hours. To others, it looked like he was just standing there and thinking about the Pantheon monument. However, 2 hours had passed, and Anderson had already reached the 2nd level of comprehension. Holt had even used his Myriad Stars Palace's legacy to decipher the Pantheon monument and had already reached the 3rd level of comprehension. Streams of white light gathered behind him, forming another circle of light. With the help of Heaven's perception, Wei Lung had also stepped into the 2nd level of comprehension. Rhoda continued to look at the contents of the monument unhurriedly. Manny would occasionally frown and then smile, as if he was at the critical juncture of a breakthrough. David was so anxious that his forehead was covered in sweat, but there were still no signs of a breakthrough. However, he gradually calmed down, and there was even a mysterious sense of leisure about him. It was because although he had not achieved any breakthrough in his comprehension of the Pantheon monument, neither had Fang Xinjian. David looked at how Fang Xinjian was standing there, alternating between grief and fury, clenching his fists occasionally, yet showing no signs of comprehension. Seeing this scene, David felt like laughing. After all, even if he was unable to comprehend the Pantheon monument, Fang Xinjian would also be unable to comprehend the Pantheon monument. The old man who was guarding the monument looked at Fang Xinjian and shook his head. He had previously received news that there was another genius who had attained Heaven's perception at the age of 17 in this year's regional selection. However, it seemed that Fang Xinjian was still too rash, and his mental state was not stable enough. Seeing that others had stepped into the realm of comprehension one after another, Fang Xinjian felt grief and fury, as if he was in a bad mood. This would only make it harder for Fang Xinjian to calm down and comprehend the Pantheon monument, resulting in his failure in the regional selection. Therefore, the old man planned on advising Fang Xinjian, giving him some pointers so that he could maintain a good state of mind and comprehend the Pantheon monument once again. However, just then, spots of light suddenly appeared around Fang Xinjian. Fang Xinjian finally completed the last piece of the constellation, and in that instant, the model of the Pantheon monument in his brain shone brightly. Countless information gushed forth, and he seemed to be able to see the trajectories of countless stars moving to and fro. The operations of tens of thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, or even millions of years, represented endless ancientness and power. In this world, strength rules supreme. In this world, the stars rule supreme. Out of all the powers in this world, the power of the stars is the most violent, supreme, powerful, and unyielding. It is the toughest. A man's voice seemed to ring out next to Fang Xinjian's ears, and a new skill gradually appeared on his stats window: astral powers. To think that he still managed to comprehend it? When the old man saw the spots of light next to Fang Xinjian, he nodded and broke into a satisfied smile. He then turned to look at Holt. He was still looking forward to whether Holt would be able to attain a breakthrough to the 4th level of comprehension. However, at the next moment, his eyes opened wide and his mouth opened wide, as if his eyeballs were about to pop out. A circle of light appeared above Fang Xinjian's head. He had attained another breakthrough and stepped into the 2nd level of comprehension. Then, Fang Xinjian took a step forward and his body floated up slowly. Streams of light appeared behind his back, and his mouth opened slightly as he said, "Astral powers rule supreme." At the next moment, a circle of light formed behind his head. Fang Xinjian had attained a breakthrough to the 3rd level of comprehension. How is this possible? The old man looked at this scene in disbelief. He had never seen anyone who could attain 3 levels of comprehension in one go. In the distance, Anderson, Holt, and Wei Ling had no choice but to stop their comprehensions and turn to look at Fang Xinjian, as if they were looking at a monster. David roared in his heart. He kept rubbing his eyes, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Rhoda, Manny, and the other students could not help but look over. It was because the commotion caused by Fang Xinjian's breakthrough to the Pantheon Monument was simply too astonishing. To think that he had attained a breakthrough to 3 levels in one go. However, under everyone's horrified gazes, spots of light started to appear on Fang Xinjian's shoulder once again. Kacha-kacha sounds rang out incessantly, and those spots of light seemed to have a form of mass, forming a new circle of light and floating above Fang Xinjian's shoulder. Breakthrough to the 4th level of comprehension. However, in Fang Xinjian's consciousness, countless pieces of information continued to gush into his brain. Then, with his astonishing talent, determination, and comprehension ability, they were all absorbed into his brain. Chapter 225. Under everyone's astonished gazes, 2 bands of light once again grew out from Fang Xinjian's back. The 2 bands of light continued to intertwine and eventually turned into a 4th circle of light. 5th level breakthrough. Right now, his astral powers had gone through 4 levels of evolution, and the stats window had turned into the words prodigious astral divine powers. However, this was not the end. Fang Xinjian could feel that the information was still gushing into his brain. All sorts of knowledge regarding the astral energies, and the Earth's heaviness exploded in his mind one after another. It was like a waterfall of data pouring down endlessly from a computer screen. Fang Xinjian's brain continued to work rapidly, absorbing all this knowledge like a sponge. The astonishing perseverance, courage, comprehension, and logical abilities bestowed upon him by the world's #1 talent allowed him to absorb the information at an astonishing rate. When he broke through to the 5th level, the old man's eyes widened to the size of light bulbs. Holt felt as if his worldview was going to collapse. How could this be? The most correct way to solve this ancient star chart should be the method I used. This should be a star chart. Why is it that he's able to solve it faster than me? And it's even higher. Anderson, Wei Ling, Manny, Rhoda, and the other students all stared in a daze at the circle of light behind Fang Xinjian. Their minds were completely blank, unable to say a single word. What Fang Xinjian had done was simply too astonishing. Who had ever heard of someone solving 5 levels of the Pantheon Monument in one go? However, in such a state, another circle of light formed at the back of Fang Xinjian's waist. He had broken through to the 6th level. 6 levels? It's really 6 levels? There are really 6 levels to the Pantheon Monument's mysteries? The old man's body trembled intensely. To be able to see the Pantheon Monument's mysteries being solved in his lifetime, he could die without any regret. What could it be? To be able to contain 6 levels of mysteries. What kind of world-shaking martial arts would the melancholic monarch's core legacy be? Everyone looked at Fang Xinjian with the same expectant gaze. At this moment, there were no longer any feelings of jealousy or envy. What they were most curious about was what skills Fang Xinjian had learned. However, just as they were so astonished that they were almost numb, Thinking that it was finally over, Fang Xinjian gritted his teeth and let out a loud bellow, "There's more." In that instant, it was as if the space had been shaken violently by a violent power. The Pantheon monument started to sway violently, emitting streams of dazzling white light. What's going? Therefore, under everyone's astonished and almost numb gazes, a sixth light circle grew out from Fang Xinjian's back, and he had broken through to the seventh level. Under everyone's gazes, a Fang Xinjian had Then, under everyone's astonished and terrified gazes, a golden figure slowly came out from the Pantheon monument. The old man who guarded the monument opened his mouth wide and blurted out, "Lord Monarch?" The old man had seen the portrait of the Great Western Region Regional Academy's founder, the melancholic monarch. The golden figure that had come out from the Pantheon monument looked exactly like the melancholic monarch. How could he not be astonished? Hearing the old man's words, everyone looked at the golden figure on the Pantheon monument in astonishment. If this person who had suddenly appeared was really the melancholic monarch, then wouldn't this divine-level expert have lived for over 200 years? Everyone felt their hair stand on end, but the golden melancholic monarch did not seem to mind. He merely looked at Fang Xinjian, who was surrounded by the 6 light circles, smiled and nodded, his face filled with satisfaction. He then looked toward the other examinees who had comprehended the Pantheon monument and broke into a smile. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. It was as if he wanted to say something but was unable to. At the next moment, the golden figure exploded into a myriad of light rays, shooting out toward everyone present. Everyone wanted to dodge, but how could they possibly dodge light speed? They were all struck by the light rays. However, this was not an attack but a gift. A total of 4 people present, Holt, Anderson, Manny, and Rhoda, were pierced by the light rays. The instant they were hit by the light rays, various illusions immediately appeared in their minds. Their outstanding talent was completely unleashed. This light ray seemed to have the ability to dig out one's talent and potential. In that instant, it gave the 4 of them a layer of inspiration, the inspiration of heaven's perception. Rhoda clenched her fists in disbelief. She turned her head, feeling as if there were voices in the surroundings that wanted to talk to her. This is the inspiration of heaven's perception? I feel that I'm only a step away from heaven's perception. The same feeling rose up in Holt, Anderson, and Manny's minds. The old man guarding the monument sighed and said, "It seems that this is the last message left behind by the melancholic monarch in the Pantheon monument. When someone unravels the final profoundness of the Pantheon monument, this message will appear, helping the few people with the greatest potential to unlock heaven's perception." He threw a glance at the other examinees, but it was clear from his words that he had not fully expressed his thoughts. Clearly, other than Holt, Anderson, Manny, and Rhoda, as well as Wei Ling who had already attained heaven's perception, the potential of the others did not catch the melancholic monarch's eye. They could not even unlock heaven's perception. Hearing these words, David was infuriated. Why didn't the melancholic monarch choose me? It's one thing for Anderson and Holt. One of them is the shadow death god, while the other is the astral ancestor's grand disciple. But what are the other 2? Are they even worthy of being compared to me? However, at the next moment, looking at Fang Xinjian, who was in the middle of the 6 circles of light, David felt as if a basin of cold water had been poured over his head, drenching him to the core. To think that Fang Xinjian had comprehended all 7 levels of profoundness and completely solved the Pantheon monument? This made him feel extremely lost and in despair. The old man who guarded the monument walked up to Fang Xinjian and saw Fang Xinjian slowly descending from the air. The 6 circles of light behind him shattered one by one. The old man looked at Fang Xinjian fervently and said, "What on earth have you comprehended? What kind of technique is it? Is it the melancholic monarch's legacy?" Everyone else turned their gazes over as well. They were clearly very curious about what Fang Xinjian had comprehended. 200 years ago, the melancholic monarch, who had created the empire together with 7 other divine-level experts, the regional academy and the Pantheon monument. What kind of legacy had he left behind in the Pantheon monument? Who would not be curious? Who would not be agitated? However, looking at their curious gazes, Fang Xinjian threw a glance at his stats window and said, "Must I say it?" Chapter 226. Hearing Fang Xinjian's words, a hint of helplessness flashed in everyone's eyes. The old man who guarded the monument also exhaled and said, "Of course, you can choose not to." The martial arts comprehended from the Pantheon monument concerned the secrets of the powers of countless knights and conferred knights. Of course, he could choose to keep it a secret. However, the old man added, "But you must know that if you're willing to announce the profoundness you've comprehended, the Academy will definitely give you a great compensation." Fang Xinjian blinked and asked, "Is there a level 30 divine remains equipment?" Hearing this, the old man coughed violently and said furiously, "Do you think that divine remains equipment are cabbages? That you can get your hands on them easily? But the melancholic monarch's legacy is not cabbages either. Unless the Academy can bring out a divine remains equipment, I won't be exchanging it." The old man looked at Fang Xinjian with a bitter expression. However, he was clearly not a tyrant like the first prince, who would take whatever he wanted and bully others with his strength. After all, he had once been the governor and the headmaster of the regional academy. Of course, he would not bully the younger generation. However, he still tried to persuade Fang Xinjian, "Why do you want a divine remains equipment? That thing can only be used for fighting and killing. Now that the world has been peaceful for a long time, what's the use of it? The Academy can provide you with other things. You must know that in your cultivation after the second transition, other than exchanging information with ether particles, you'll also need to exchange energy with ether particles. Which place in the world has the highest ether particle density? Of course, it's the Sacred Land, which is 1 level higher than Secret Realms. However, the ether particle density in the Sacred Land varies as well. As long as you announce the method and techniques that you've comprehended, I can let you use the Academy's highest grade Sacred Land for free. The ether particle density there is 100 times that of ordinary spaces. However, how could Fang Xinjian possibly reveal the method he had comprehended the Pantheon monument? As for the specific techniques, after taking a look at the introduction of the prodigious astral divine powers waves, he decided not to reveal them. Unless the other party could give him a divine remains equipment, he would then consider telling them the edited version. However, the old man didn't give up. He kept following Fang Xinjian and kept talking. Fang Xinjian couldn't be bothered with him. He simply sat down and waited for the 12 hours to be over. Most of the other students no longer had the mood to comprehend the Pantheon monument. Even if some of them were to force themselves to do so, their minds were filled with Fang Xinjian's astonishing prowess, as well as the old man's incessant pestering. "What will it take for you to tell me? How about this, I'll use my killing technique to exchange for it, alright? Or, I still have a level 29 superior divine weapon. How about I exchange it with you for the secret on it? How about this? I'll take you in as my disciple. I'm the governor from 2 batches ago. I'll impart all of my experiences to you and let you be my last disciple." Fang Xinjian didn't say anything, but the people around him couldn't help but look at the old man. The old man frowned. "What's wrong?" Manny could not help but say, "This person has even rejected the divine level expert, the holy Orison, to take him in as a disciple. Do you think that you'll be able to move him?" "What? You rejected that old fogey, Raoul?" This old man's seniority was clearly very high. To think that even the holy Orison had become an old fogey in his mouth. So what if I rejected him? Although he's a divine level expert, one level higher than me. That's because I've spent too much time trying to solve the mysteries of the Pantheon monument. My killing techniques and specialties are definitely more powerful than his. With your aptitude, if you were to learn them, you'd definitely be number one in the world in the future. That Mage King, the Pope, and the others wouldn't be a match for you." The others shook their heads. Rhoda and the others continued to comprehend the Pantheon monument with the inspiration from their heaven's perception. With the help of the melancholic monarch, they had unlocked their innate potential and instantly felt that their minds were much clearer than before. Various inspirations kept flashing in their minds with each and every move they made. In the process of comprehending the Pantheon monument, Rhoda's body also lit up with many light spots. She had broken through to the first level. The others also calmed down and continued to comprehend the Pantheon monument. David was the only one who was still unable to calm down. It was because the news of Fang Xinjian's breakthrough to the 7th level was too shocking. His mind was like boiling water, boiling and churning incessantly. He was unable to calm down and think about the Pantheon monument. On the other side, Fang Xinjian could not be bothered to listen to the old man's words. He looked at the new skill that had appeared on his stats window, Prodigious Astral Divine Powers Wave. This skill was very interesting, or rather, very special. It was an ultimate technique that the melancholic monarch had unintentionally created. The power of the stars, the world reigned supreme. It referred to the strongest power in this world, the power to move the celestial bodies. Disregarding other aspects and just based on the absolute value, the power to move the stars was indeed the strongest power in this world. With sufficient gravity, one could move the Earth, the Moon, push the Sun, create neutron stars, black holes, and even distort spacetime. The prodigious astral divine powers waves that Fang Xinjian had cultivated was the ultimate technique that the melancholic monarch was most proud of. With the reinforcement from the powers of the stars, he could greatly increase his powers. However, there were no stars in Miracle World. Therefore, the melancholic monarch borrowed the powers from the earth under his feet. In his understanding, the earth under his feet was also an extremely huge star, and the power he borrowed was naturally gravity. However, it was not a killing technique, nor was it a pure martial technique. The prodigious astral divine powers wave. Just from the name alone, one could tell that it was a type of waves that cultivated the physical body through gravity. Everything in the world would be affected by gravity, and the human body would constantly be affected by it. Moreover, the people in Miracle World still believed that gravity was a manifestation of ether particles. Therefore, the prodigious astral divine powers waves adjusted gravity through ether particles, causing the gravitational forces acting on one's body to circulate continuously for 24 hours a day. The prodigious astral divine powers waves could make use of gravity to greatly increase one's powers. It was equivalent to solidifying a large amount of gravity within one's body, and each and every one of his movements would have the power to overturn rivers and seas. It could also instantly and explosively strengthen and control the gravitational forces around him during battle. As the strongest force in the universe, the prodigious astral divine powers waves, which had been cultivated to the highest realm, could easily tear apart mountains, seas, and even distort spacetime. However, right now, this waves was flashing, as if it would disappear at any moment. It was because Fang Xinjian already had the Sonido sword Zephyr Wave. Now that he had obtained the waves cultivation method for the prodigious astral divine powers waves, if he did not switch to it, the prodigious astral divine powers waves would gradually disappear. It was because each person could only circulate one type of wave. Of course, Fang Xinjian would cultivate the prodigious astral divine powers wave. The vital energy, blood, and muscles in his body started to circulate incessantly. The original Sonido sword Zephyr waves gradually stopped, and the prodigious astral divine powers waves started to circulate. The replacement of waves had started. Chapter 227. In the hall, unbeknownst to everyone else, Feng Xinjian had started to modify his wave. He followed the method of the prodigious astral divine powers barrier, using ether particles to guide the gravity under his feet and slowly building up his wave. Before the final 12 hours were up, Feng Xinjian had finally completed the prodigious astral divine powers wave. And after the level 7 waves had been transformed into the prodigious astral divine powers waves, it had also become level 1. The prodigious astral divine powers waves increased by 10 points in strength, 3 points in agility, 3 points in reaction, 3 points in endurance and 3 points in flexibility. In terms of attributes, the prodigious astral divine power used gravity to strengthen itself, far surpassing the speed of the sonic sword breath. Furthermore, he did not only possess a high attribute bonus. After cultivating the prodigious astral divine power, he could control his own gravitational force and balance it out. In other words, he could fly. However, a level 1 prodigious astral divine power could only allow him to float. If he wanted to fly, he would need to be at least level 5. What was even more amazing was that the prodigious astral divine powers could perform terra ingurgitation once every hour, allowing him to absorb the gravitational pull from the matter within a range of several kilometers and add all of it to his physical body, crazily increasing his powers. This meant that if a house weighed 1,000,000 tons, then after absorbing its gravity, Feng Xinjian would be able to punch out with a force of 1,000,000 tons. Level 1 prodigious astral divine power would be able to absorb and unleash the gravitational force within a radius of 1 kilometer. Level 2 prodigious astral divine power would be able to cover a radius of 2 kilometers. Level 10 prodigious astral divine power would be able to cover a radius of 10 kilometers. The gravitational force within a 10-kilometer radius was absorbed, which meant that the area within a 10-kilometer radius had become a gravity-free environment. This gravitational force that had disappeared could be directly used by Feng Xinjian. It was as if each of his punches and kicks were truly like mountains and seas crashing down. How terrifying was this? The extremely high attribute increment, the ability to adjust gravity, and the ability to use terra ingurgitation every hour. These were the powerful aspects of the prodigious astral divine powers wave. As expected of the melancholic monarch's greatest legacy and fundamental martial technique. Just the ripples alone were already so powerful. Feng Xinjian wondered how powerful the melancholic monarch's killing technique would be if he were to unleash it at full power. However, Feng Xinjian had relied on heaven's perception and the information from the Pantheon monument in order to cultivate the prodigious astral divine powers. This waves technique required the use of ether particles to control gravity. In fact, it was a waves that only second transition knights could cultivate. Hence, Feng Xinjian's current limit was already at level 1. If he wanted to upgrade his prodigious astral divine power, he would have to wait until he had completed his second job transition. It was because only at the second transition would one be able to use ether particles to activate the great powers of the heavens and earth. Only then would martial techniques become martial arts. Therefore, after the 12 hours of observing the Pantheon monument observation had passed, Feng Xinjian had converted the waves into the prodigious astral divine power. Name: Feng Xinjian. Age: 17. Class: Wind Shadow Sword Divinity Level. Level 19. Strength 73 plus 5 Agility 182 plus 5 Reaction 77 Endurance 47 Flexibility 49 Ether Synchronization Rate 10%. The attributes above come into effect once the prodigious astral divine powers waves is activated. Due to perfect muscles, plus 5 in strength attribute. Techniques: Rebirth Sword Technique, New 9-Headed Dragon Sword Technique, Luminous Heaven Soaring Slash, Ether Sword Ripples, Level 3 Ether Divine Art Specialties. Genius Swordsmanship, Elementary Survival Instinct, Internal Healing, Internal Training, Sword Specialist, Heightened Reflexes, perfect muscles, elementary berserkness, unparalleled sword intent apex waves. Level 1 prodigious astral divine powers waves mental cultivation method. Level 5 universal sword dominance lunisolar other than. Strength. His other attributes had been reduced by 1 level due to the recultivation of his wave. However, this was only temporary. As long as his prodigious astral divine powers reached level 3, he would be able to surpass the original Sonido sword Zephyr in all aspects. Thereafter, the difference between the two would only get greater and greater. After the 12 hours were up, Fang Xinjian looked up and discovered that the number of people who had attained a breakthrough had increased once again. Holt had already attained a breakthrough to the 5th level of the Pantheon Monument. However, his eyes were locked tightly as he felt that there was a huge barrier before him, preventing him from breaking through. Why do I feel that the inscriptions on the Pantheon Monument seem to be lacking something? What on earth is it lacking? Why can't I continue with my comprehension? Anderson's countenance was extremely grim. Although he had attained a breakthrough to the 3rd level of the Pantheon Monument and was already a great talent, he was still a far cry from Holt's 5th level, let alone Fang Xinjian's 7th level. Moreover, other than him, Wei Lung had also attained a breakthrough to the 3rd level. Rhoda's face revealed a satisfied expression. Like Manny, she had also attained a breakthrough to the 2nd level. Manny, on the other hand, did not dwell on the Pantheon Monument. Instead, he paid more attention to the hint of inspiration regarding heaven's perception that the melancholic monarch had given him. Anyway, by the looks of it, having attained 2 levels of the Pantheon Monument would be sufficient for him to enter the top 16 and participate in the next round of arena battles. Right now, compared to the Pantheon Monument, he was more concerned about when he would be able to attain heaven's perception. David's countenance was ashen as he hid at the back of the crowd, as if he did not dare to look into Fang Xinjian's eyes. After going through 3 battles, Fang Xinjian's performance had become increasingly terrifying. David had completely extinguished all thoughts of competing against Fang Xinjian and only wanted to stay far away from Fang Xinjian. He no longer dared to go against Fang Xinjian. However, after experiencing such a blow, being humiliated, treated as a joke, and having his ambitions completely extinguished by Fang Xinjian, it was likely that he would not be able to make any more improvements in his life. Just as everyone was about to head out, the old man who guarded the monument blocked Fang Xinjian's path and said, "Hey, you're really not going to consider becoming my disciple? I've taught countless disciples in my life, and many of them have become top-notch experts in the world. You definitely won't lose out if you become my disciple. Not only will you be able to learn and look at all the killing techniques in the academy, I'll even provide you with various heavenly and earthly treasures and ferocious beasts. Won't you consider it?" It was already night time outside the hall, but there were still several hundred spectators waiting here. In front of them were the 4 examiners. Governor Devitt smiled and said, "What do you guys think the results of the Pantheon Monument observation this time around will be like? There are too many geniuses in this batch. Naturally, the results will far surpass those of the previous batches," the old man Luke said. "But if we're talking about the first place, it should still be Holt or Fang Xinjian, right?" Yaris said, "There's also Anderson. Don't forget about him just because of Holt's and Fang Xinjian's outstanding performances. For him to be able to transition into the Shadow Death God, which no one has succeeded in the past 200 years, he definitely has something extraordinary about him. His talent is definitely not inferior to Holt's or Fang Xinjian's. It's just that his accumulation is not as strong as theirs. And this stage is a test of one's talent. He still has a lot of hope." Armstrong, whose face was filled with scars, said, "There's also Wei Lung. Don't forget about him. Compared to the other 3, his accumulation is really lacking. But even so, he was able to attain heaven's perception. This shows his talent. Moreover, he's carrying a blood feud with him. He's suppressed to the extreme, but the stronger the suppression, the stronger the rebound. Once he explodes, the earth will tremble and the mountains will shake. He might even soar up into the sky. Amongst the crowd, there were also people discussing the rankings for this stage. I think highly of Feng Xinjian. His performance in the previous 2 stages was too outstanding. His abilities are on a different level from the other knight. So what if he's strong? This stage of Pantheon Monument observation tests the cultivator's talent. Although Feng Xinjian is strong now, it doesn't mean that his talent is the best. In terms of talent, Anderson is still better. At the very least, there have been people who have succeeded in transitioning into a windstorm sword hero, but no one has succeeded in becoming a shadow death god in the past 200 years. His talent is probably above Feng Xinjian's. It's useless to just have talent. I think highly of Holt. The legacy of a divine-level expert is definitely not to be underestimated. His accumulation is definitely the strongest amongst the few of them. I know that other than talent, what's most important in deciphering the Pantheon Monument is a strong foundation. Moreover, in terms of talent, Holt has the legacy of a divine-level expert. How can his talent be weak? Just as everyone was discussing, and exchanging their opinions, the door to the hall opened. Chapter 228. Seeing that the door had been opened, Devitt smiled and said, "All right, according to the rules, you guys can come out according to the number of levels you have comprehended from the highest to the lowest. After you come out, show us what you've comprehended." The reason for judging from the highest to the lowest was naturally so that the examiners could compare and judge the students' comprehensions more directly. In the hall, everyone's gazes turned toward Feng Xinjian. Logically speaking, he should be the first to go out. However, the old man waved his hand and said, "It's fine. You guys can go out first. I'll have a chat with this little brother." He looked at Feng Xinjian with a burning gaze and said, "Are you really not going to reconsider? Listen to me, I have a killing technique that allows one to transform into 4 people, easily increasing one's battle prowess by 4 times. Holt and the others smiled helplessly. In the end, Holt was still the first to walk out. In everyone's eyes, the fact that Holt was the first to walk out naturally meant that he was the person who had comprehended the highest level. Everyone's eyes also flashed with a hint of this is only natural. There was no need to doubt the aptitude of a divine-level disciple. Devitt also smiled and looked at Holt in anticipation, saying, "Good, Holt, you really didn't disappoint me. Quickly show us how many levels you've comprehended." Holt's expression was a little strange, but he did not say anything. He merely nodded and thought for a while. In the next moment, light spots flashed all over his body and 4 circles of light rose up behind him. As layers of halos rose from his back, everyone's expressions changed from surprise to shock, and finally, shock. 4 circles of light? Doesn't that mean that he has comprehended 5 levels of the Pantheon Monument? He has comprehended 5 levels of the Pantheon Monument? My God, the latest record is only Governor Devitt's 4 levels, right? To think that he has reached the 5th level? Holt really lives up to his name as someone favored by the heavens. Amazing, he's really too amazing. An uproar broke out among the spectators. Seeing this scene, a hint of joy flashed past Devitt's face. He smiled and said, "Good, good, good. The heavens are really blessing me, Sinkoda. To think that after I've broken through to the 4th level, there's still someone who can break through to the 5th level of the Pantheon Monument's profoundness, breaking the record once again." He looked at Holt with a face full of praise and said, "Holt, you really didn't disappoint me. You're so talented that it makes people slap the table in admiration. Among the heroes in the world today, you're already a first-rate character. How is it? Is the 5th layer the last layer?" With that, he looked at Holt with curiosity and excitement. The 3 examiners at the side nodded repeatedly when they heard this, and they looked at Holt with expressions of admiration, as if they were looking at a peerless piece of unpolished jade. They wished for nothing more than to take Holt in their hands and carefully carve him, so that he could shine brilliantly in the future. They had thought that with so many geniuses provoking and competing against each other, there might be someone who would be able to achieve a breakthrough under the pressure. However, they had felt that it would already be very amazing if they could reach the 4th level, which Governor Devitt had achieved previously. They had not expected that someone would be able to reach the 5th level. This was simply a miracle. However, at the thought that Feng Xinjian was the astral ancestor's grand disciple, they shook their heads in pity. It's a pity. If only he didn't have a master. Hearing that, Holt thought of Feng Xinjian, who had yet to come out. However, he smiled bitterly and shook his head, saying, "Lord Devitt, you're too kind. However, I'm still not satisfied after reaching the 5th level. I'm also not up to it." "Sai, you deserve all these praises." Devitt thought that Feng Xinjian was still being humble, so he waved his hand and said, "It's already very rare for you to be able to comprehend the 5th level. It'll probably be a very, very long time before anyone can surpass you. It's true that you deserve to be the first in this stage." Holt's expression was awkward. However, he did not say anything on the spot and merely smiled bitterly, shaking his head. A large group of young ladies among the spectators cheered, and streams of scorching rays seemed as if they wanted to roast Holt. Young Master Holt is really the best. Of course. Otherwise, how could he have been taken in as a disciple of a divine-level expert? His talent is definitely the best in this batch. The 5th level. This has surpassed the record that Lord Devitt broke back then. It's a new record. Moreover, how old was Lord Devitt back then? He was almost 40 years old. How old is Holt? These young ladies were all aristocratic ladies who admired Holt. Right now they were cheering as if there was no one else around them, immediately causing the others around them to feel displeased. However, they did not care at all. It was as if they only had eyes for Holt, and they did not notice that Holt's expression was slightly awkward. Devitt frowned, but he still continued to ask, "Since you've already comprehended the 5th level, then let me ask you, Holt, are you willing to tell us the method to resolve it? We'll use something of equal value to exchange it with you." Holt had long since thought of a way to deal with this. He shook his head and said, "I'm sorry, but this method concerns my teacher's and grandmaster's martial arts secrets. Forgive me for not being able to say it." Right now, the many spectators outside the hall were looking at the 4 circles of light behind Holt, their faces filled with astonishment and envy. Treja Xiu sighed and said, "To think that he has comprehended the 5th level of the Pantheon Monument's mysteries. To be able to be taken in as a disciple by a divine-level expert, Holt is truly a prodigy. This has become the highest record in the past 200 years. His junior, Zhou Yong, also nodded and said, "It seems that Holt has gained the most from the Pantheon Monument this time around. To be able to comprehend the 5th level of the Pantheon Monument. To be able to comprehend the 5th level of the Pantheon Monument's mysteries. To what extent has his talent reached?" Cursed City Lord also sighed and shook his head. "Amazing, really amazing. Back then, I was only able to comprehend the 2nd level of the Pantheon Monument's mysteries and was already known as a genius. Compared to Holt, the difference is like the difference between clouds and mud. I wonder how many levels Xinjian will be able to comprehend. With his talent, it shouldn't be a problem for him to reach the 3rd level. It's just that I wonder if he'll be able to attain a breakthrough to the 4th level. It's a pity, a pity. If Xinjian also had the legacy of a divine-level expert, he'd probably be able to catch up to Holt." Just as he said this, the golden-haired aristocratic lady turned and looked at Cursed City Lord unhappily, saying, "Aren't you thinking too highly of Feng Xinjian? How can he be compared to our Holt?" Saying that, she looked at Holt lovingly and said, "Holt is the grand disciple of a divine-level expert. He's of noble birth and has a strong background. His talent is 10 streets higher than Fang Xinjian's. What right do you have to compare our Holt with Fang Xinjian? Do you know how hard-working Holt is? Do you know how hard it is for him? Cursed City Lord frowned and said, You're Holt's relative? How could I possibly be young Master Holt's relative? That young lady said, I'll be satisfied as long as he can take a look at me later. Lilia immediately turned and glared at the golden-haired aristocratic lady. However, Cursed City Lord stopped her and shook his head. He could not be bothered with that aristocratic lady. He knew that it would be useless no matter what he said to a brainless fan like her. When the others heard Holt say that he had used the astral ancestor's legacy to solve the 5th level of the Pantheon Monument's mysteries, a hint of understanding flashed in their hearts. Chapter 229. A deity-level technique was used to counter another deity-level technique. No wonder Holt could reach the 5th level. This time, Holt is number 1. After all, he has a deep foundation. At the front, hearing Holt's words, a hint of pity flashed on Devitt's face. Since this concerns the profoundness of the astral ancestor, it's naturally not something that we can pry into. He turned to look at the door and asked, Who's next? Anderson slowly walked out from the door. Seeing the look of anticipation on Governor Devitt's face, Anderson's lips twitched and he casually walked up to him, releasing 2 layers of light. With Holt's previous provocation, the crowd was much calmer toward Andre's performance, but they were still full of envy and jealousy. Devitt nodded in satisfaction. Although Anderson's results were slightly inferior to Holt's, Holt was a divine-level expert's grand disciple. It was understandable that Anderson's results were slightly worse than Holt's, but this was still a very impressive result. Good. You've comprehended the 3rd level of the mystery. This result is something that no one has achieved in the past 10 years. This is really good. The golden-haired young lady next to Lilia sneered and said, It seems that Fang Xinjian can't even be compared to Anderson, yet he still wants to compete with our Holt. He really doesn't know his place. Lilia's face was flushed with anger, but she could not refute the facts in front of her. After Andre got off the stage, Wei Ling walked up again. One halo flashed, followed by another, showing that he had broken through to the 3rd level of the profoundness. Ha 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 ha. Devitt laughed out loud and said, Our great Western region has a successor. It's true that this batch of students is filled with resplendent stars, shining brilliantly on each other. However, since both you and Anderson have attained a breakthrough to the 3rd level of the mysteries, you'll be tied for 2nd place. After all, the results of this stage would not affect the final rankings of the regional selection. The final 10 rankings of the regional selection would be decided through the arena battles. Therefore, no one had any objections. Next should be Fang Xinjian, right? Didn't you hear? They were told to come out according to the level they were on. The later they came out, the lower the level they were on. Treja Clan Xiao Yi stood amidst the crowd, looking in the direction of the gate in amusement. Windstorm Sword Hero? Even after attaining Heaven's perception, I still can't compare to the other 3. Just as he was halfway through his sentence, Manny strolled out from the door, displaying 2 halos. Devitt praised Manny, but he couldn't help but frown. It was a very simple logic. Since Manny had come out before Fang Xinjian, did that not mean that Fang Xinjian, whom many of them thought highly of, was not only inferior to Holt, Anderson, and Wei Ling, but was even inferior to Manny? Following that, Rhoda and the others also came out one by one to receive Devitt's commendation. Seeing that so many people had comprehended the martial arts on the Pantheon Monument, Devitt smiled brilliantly. However, he could not help but sigh inwardly. This was because even those who had mastered the 1st level of the profound mystery had come out, but Fang Xinjian had yet to come out. Didn't that mean that Fang Xinjian was below them? Finally, another knight walked out from the door. It was an examinee who had not even comprehended the first level of the profound mystery. Under the gazes of the 4 examiners, he started to explain his method of resolving the mystery and the things he had thought of, hoping that the examiners would evaluate him. Devitt shook his head and said to them, "There's no need for you to be discouraged. In the previous batches, many knights had not been able to comprehend the first level of the profound mystery. You just need to tell us about your method of resolving the mystery and what you have gained. We'll judge and give you marks." With that, the spectators finally could not help but start whispering amongst themselves. "Haha, to think that Fang Xinjian hasn't even comprehended the first level of the profound mystery? That's impossible, right? With his talent at attaining heaven's perception, it shouldn't be possible." "What's impossible about it? Didn't you hear the governor's instructions? The examinees will come out in descending order according to the number of levels they have comprehended. Fang Xinjian has yet to come out, meaning that he hasn't even comprehended the first level. I think he's too embarrassed to come out." That might really be the case. After all, in history, there has never been a blind person who came to the 3rd stage. Perhaps without sight, he really wouldn't be able to receive part of the information on the Pantheon monument. That's why I say that a blind person will always be a blind person. No matter how strong his battle prowess or how talented he is, he might just be eliminated in this stage. At the back of the crowd, Treja Clan Xiao Yi laughed out loud. As he laughed, he suddenly held onto his stomach and waved his hand at Zhou Yong. "This is really funny. This is really too funny. Ha 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 ha, Fang Xinjian, to think that we've placed so much importance on you. In the end, he himself might just be eliminated." Xiao Yi could not help but laugh as he waved his hand at Zhou Yong. "We've really been worried for nothing. This guy is just a joke." Zhou Yong could not help but shake his head as well, as if he had not expected that things would end up in such a farce. Fang Xinjian had not even comprehended the first level of the profound mystery. On the other side, the golden-haired aristocratic young lady threw a mocking glance at Lilia and started giggling. Some people insist on joining the group of geniuses, but in the end, the Pantheon monument will be able to test out who is the real deal. I said that his heaven's perception might be an exaggeration. When Lilia, Ferdinand, and the others heard the young lady's words, they all felt extremely aggrieved. However, they could not think of anything to refute her. At the same time, they were extremely unwilling to believe that Fang Xinjian could not even comprehend the first level of the profound mystery. They could not help but worry that something might have happened to Fang Xinjian inside. After Devitt and the other examiners commented on a few more nights, Fang Xinjian finally shook off the old man guarding the monument and walked out slowly. Seeing that Fang Xinjian had finally walked out, many of the spectators laughed, looking as if they were waiting to see a joke. To think that a genius would not be able to match up to other knights. Many of the spectators loved to add insult to injury. Examiner Luke, whose face was filled with wrinkles, also shook his head. However, he still had some suspicions as to whether there was some mistake. He asked, "Fang Xinjian? Why are you ranked so far behind? Did something go wrong? Forget it. Have you reached the 4th level?" Holt had only managed to reach the 5th level because he had inherited a divine-level legacy. Of course, he did not expect Fang Xinjian to be able to do so. Seeing Fang Xinjian shake his head, Luke could not hide the disappointment in his eyes as he continued to ask, "Then is it the 3rd level?" Fang Xinjian continued to shake his head. The spectators could not help but start booing. However, Fang Xinjian seemed to be able to tell what everyone was thinking. However, he knew that there was nothing much to explain. If he were to show it, everyone would naturally shut up. Therefore, he walked up to the center and said calmly, "Let me demonstrate." Under the crowd's amused, pitiful, and mocking gazes, spots of light started to flash on Fang Xinjian's body. Chapter 230. Fang Xinjian did not reply. Instead, he thought about the many star charts and the trajectories on them, and many spots of light started to shine all over his body. Then the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth circles of light lit up one by one. When the third circle of light lit up, everyone was once again dumbfounded. When the fourth, fifth, and even sixth circles of light lit up, the entire place fell silent. It was as if everyone had become mute in that instant. Lilia was the first to react. She smiled and rolled her eyes at the petrified, golden-haired aristocratic young lady, saying, "Ha ha, what level has Holt comprehended? I think it's the 5th level?" The young lady's countenance instantly darkened, but this time around, she was unable to say anything in rebuttal. She could only clench her teeth, feeling an extreme tightness in her chest. To think that Feng Xinjian had comprehended all 7 levels of the Pantheon Monument's mysteries. This news was too unbelievable and shocking. If someone had told Governor Devitt this before, he would definitely have scoffed and would not have believed it. However, now that the truth was right before his eyes, he had no choice but to believe it. He even saw the old man walking out together with Feng Xinjian. He asked in astonishment, "Why have you come out as well?" The old man grinned, revealing his incomplete set of yellow teeth, and said, "I'm not going to protect the Pantheon Monument anymore. You can find someone else to do it." He turned and looked at Feng Xinjian passionately, saying, "I have fate with this lad. I want to have a good talk with him." Devitt did not continue to bother with the old man, but looked excitedly at Feng Xinjian and asked, "Xinjian, you've solved the Pantheon Monument?" Looking at the 6 circles of light behind Feng Xinjian, Devitt still found it hard to believe. The old man grinned and said, "Xiaoda, you don't believe it either, right? But this lad has really solved the last level of the Pantheon Monument's mysteries. Even the melancholic monarch's spirit has appeared for the 7th level." "What?" In an instant, all 4 examiners dashed up, looking at Feng Xinjian as if they were looking at a national treasure. Their gazes were so passionate that it seemed as if they could pierce through his body. Devitt grabbed Feng Xinjian fiercely and asked, "Xinjian, have you really solved the Pantheon Monument? You've comprehended the 7th level? Then you must have obtained the fundamental inheritance of the melancholic monarch. What is it? Killing technique? Nurturing path? Or were they ripples? Mental cultivation method?" Although Devitt was a little agitated, he had already calmed down after saying that. In fact, if it was something else, even if he had obtained a divine remains equipment, he would not be so excited. However, the melancholic monarch's most fundamental and core legacy. How astonishing was this! Even amongst the many divine-level experts from 200 years ago, the melancholic monarch's powers were second to none. Devitt looked at Feng Xinjian as if he was looking at a treasure. However, after saying that, he regained his composure. He looked at Feng Xinjian and said, "Xinjian, you don't have to be in such a hurry to tell us. The Academy and the regional selection both have rules. The knight's cultivation techniques and martial arts can all be kept a secret, and there's no need for you to tell us everything. It's the same for what you've comprehended from the Pantheon Monument. However, if you're willing to announce it, we won't take it for free. Any knight who announces the profoundness of the Pantheon Monument will receive generous compensation. However, you don't have to be in a hurry to make a decision. You'll be staying in the Academy in the future anyway, so you can take your time to consider this." What Devitt was thinking was that after Feng Xinjian became a conferred knight, he would continue his studies in the regional academy. Knights who studied in the regional academy would usually choose to cultivate until they reached a bottleneck. They would then have 2 choices. One was to continue staying in the academy and continue to pursue their studies, pursuing the profoundness of ether particles. This was the path of cultivation and research. The second choice was to leave the academy after feeling that they had reached a bottleneck. The Empire would then arrange a very good position for them outside, be it in the Ministry of Finance, the military, the Royal Armory, the Royal Knight Association, the headmaster of a local academy, the city lord, or the marshal of the troops under the command of the Forbidden Army. All of these were extremely lucrative positions. Of course, after leaving the regional academy, they would not be able to return to continue their studies. Unless they passed the national selection, they would then be able to continue their cultivation in the Empire's National Academy in the imperial capital. No matter how outstanding Fang Xinjian was, no matter how difficult the 10 heavenly barriers for a conferred knight were, Devitt thought that no matter how fast he was, he would still have to stay in the academy for a few years. Naturally, he would have the time to use sugar-coated bullets to get the secrets of the Pantheon monument out. The spectators at the back were all stunned. 7 levels of profoundness, deciphering the Pantheon monument. What kind of concept was this? This was something that no one had been able to do in the past 200 years, but now it had been done by a 17-year-old young man. The 4 examiners, who had always been extremely solemn, were now surrounding Fang Xinjian. Their expressions and actions were as if they were looking at their own child. Amongst the crowd, Treja Clan Xiao Yi frowned, his eyes filled with terror. Impossible, impossible. No one has been able to decipher the final profoundness of the Pantheon monument in the past 200 years. How could Fang Xinjian have done it? Did I hear wrongly? My eyes must be playing tricks on me. However, the 6 circles of light behind Fang Xinjian's back were still lingering in his mind. He felt that this was the first time in his life that he had felt so surreal, as if he was witnessing a legend. Under everyone's extremely astonished gazes, Devitt and the other 3 returned to their original positions. They had communicated with the old man guarding the monument and were now aware of Fang Xinjian's situation. Devitt's face was glowing, as if he was very satisfied with the results this year. He smiled and said, "The effects of the Pantheon monument observation in this year's regional selection have far surpassed those in the past. A total of 13 participants have deciphered the profoundness of the Pantheon monument. 3 of them have attained a breakthrough to the 2nd level, 2 have attained a breakthrough to the 3rd level, and 1 has attained a breakthrough to the 5th level." He then officially announced the most shocking piece of news. "But what I'm most happy about is that our Great Western Region Regional Academy's Pantheon monument has finally been completely deciphered by someone. The 7th level of the Pantheon monument observation has been unraveled, achieving a feat that no one has ever accomplished before. Fang Xinjian has deciphered the 7th level of the Pantheon monument's mysteries and comprehended the melancholic monarch's greatest legacy. Therefore, I announce that the person in first place for this stage of Pantheon monument observation is Fang Xinjian." In that instant, everyone started applauding. Lilia, Ferdinand, Anthony, and Robert all clapped their hands crazily, to the point that their hands turned red. Xiao Yi and Zhou Yong looked at this scene in disbelief, feeling as if they were still in a dream. Those young ladies who had been cheering for Holt earlier were now all silent, as if someone had grabbed their throats. The subsequent rankings were based on the number of levels of the profoundness comprehended. If the number of levels was the same, then it would depend on the time taken to comprehend it. If the time taken was also the same, then it would depend on the prowess of the martial arts they had comprehended. Of course, the 3rd stage would only select the top 16. Other than the 12 participants who had comprehended the profoundness of the Pantheon monument, the remaining participants who had yet to comprehend the Pantheon monument would have to explain their own understanding and demonstrate the martial arts they had comprehended. Then, they would be selected based on their progress. Amongst them, there were some who were just there to make up the numbers, some who were spouting nonsense, and there were also some who had spoken with substance and were not too far away from comprehending the profoundness. Of course, there were people who were judging them, but not many people were paying attention to them. Everyone's attention was focused on Fang Xinjian. Right now, he was the only main character. When the last 16 contestants were chosen, everyone cheered. They were Fang Xinjian in first place, Holt in second place, Wei Ling in third place, Anderson in fourth place. As for David, he had been eliminated with a dejected look on his face. After the rankings were done, the 16 participants were brought to the canteen for a meal. After the meal, as they were all geniuses who were only one step away from becoming conferred knights, they would be talked to by the examiners and then prepared for the final stage, the arena battle. Although this ranking would not affect the results of the arena battle, it would affect Kirst's bet. At the very least, on this night, Ferdinand, who had bet on Fang Xinjian being able to come in first place in the third stage, was smiling even as he slept. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.